streaming. Yay. Well, YouTube is happy. Cool. So I'll just grab the link and share it. So today's live stream meeting is a bit different than normal. Zhenya's at home. We are doing a Zoom meeting. And we're just going to kind of, who knows what's going to happen. Maybe recap, maybe carry on with what we were doing last time. Copy that. And I know at least for one, we wanted to get into the fundamental meditation a little bit more, lengthen some things up that we might have missed. And we might get into later on, dreams, myth, and something else. It sounded enticing. It sounded enticing, but I forget. Dreams, myth, and magic. There we go. It was so enticing, I forgot it.
All very, very, very secular.
Secular magic. Alright, so let's share that link. And dev meeting. Just make sure our metadata is okay, good. To be disclosed, excellent. Yeah, party time. You guys are partying over there?
Oh, yeah.
Whoop whoop. Alright, so let's see, we got a few features to this live stream. One of them is, of course, we've got the tabletop going. So in order to send that to you, okay, good, I'm not sharing my desktop. So I will Hangouts you. How do I do that? I don't think we are established in a Hangout. So how do I do that? New meeting? No. Is it a meeting? That's what Hangouts are? Meet?
It's just on my Gmail.
Gmail. Well, how about I just send you by Gmail the link then? Compose. Just so you can see the tabletop.
Oh, yeah, there's Meet, and there's Hangouts below it.
Yeah. I don't know how to add new conversation. Okay, there we go. Yeah, oh, look at that.
Damn it, you grandpa.
Interface, you kids, and your interfaces. Oh, it looks like you're not using Hangouts yet. Let's chat. Okay, I sent you an invite, but I guess we are not hanging out on Hangouts. But anyways, so I also sent you an email. So one or the other. Okay, let's get back to business. Live stream is good. We have advertised. And yeah. So this is one of the things we've been kind of getting into, and I want to share this with you today if we have time, Shania. Just some of the work that I've been doing recently with the I've been kind of calling it deck program now. Just, I don't know if it's a poke at you, but it's kind of like the point that on this tabletop, using cards, we are supposed to be kind of running a program or like some kind of procedure. Like there's something that, it's almost like the tabletop comes alive and things are happening. It's like an interface. You've got like areas for your schemas, your agents, your media, like something, I don't know, I kind of did a bit of a carpet bomb and just went into all the different, so like imagining like as if you're having like that dashboard type of interface anywhere you go. So you've got a tabletop and then you lay out a spread of cards, and some of them are going to be like my profile, you know, like you have maybe a profile card or whatever to like share with people, you know, like a business card or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, but so any schemas that you've got loaded. What else do we got here? Your schedule. So like a card could have your schedule on it. You know what I'm saying? Like you're kind of laying out like my interface, quote unquote. Right? As a primary thing that you would do on a tabletop. Right? Just kind of lay out and kind of organize your reality, right? Like a virtual reality overlay.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something I want to get into sometime soon today, hopefully, if we have time, if it pans out. Other than that, so maybe like a bit of intro here, or context. Like I wanna kind of like introduce the fundamental meditation. So this is like something that we've been we've kind of had this, I guess, developed or isolated for a long time because it's a very core central part. It's something that's been handed down through tradition. It's like old school Buddhist, all kinds of like
Yeah.
any type of what would you call it, like system, any kind of spiritual type system, which is worth its ink on paper, deals with this kind of a meditation. It's just the basic meditation. It just lays out the perception mechanics, right? So that's why it's kind of like key to our system and key to our to what we're doing. Yeah, it's kind of one of the first things that I think anybody should encounter, I guess, with Portal Mountain, right? Because this is going to show you the triad protocol, like the meaning behind this triangle here, right? Like the triangle type symbol. And it's also how everything seems to be organized. Like all of our charts and everything, this holonic triadic structure shows up everywhere, right? So,
Right.
yeah, I think like
Well,
that's
that's the basis of the model itself. Like, it's the holonic structure is the sort of it captures the most it captures the most essential, I guess, elements of the fact that there's this stacking going on, right? Like, it didn't
it,
appear.
yep.
It didn't appear in that context. It appeared before it, but the fact that there was layering and that the jump to the next layer, that all of that was captured early on with the triad, and B, the fourth one out, the fourth odd one out, right?
Right.
We always had that going on, and eventually that got translated into this. Yeah, there was a point at which I looked at the small little diagram I had developed from the OSI model,
Mm-hmm.
where I just changed the words a little bit, and it was the first four layers of it. Um, and that gave rise to this combination of using it as the most useful aspect of grasping of
Mm-hmm.
what's relevant in the layering itself.
Yeah, that's really interesting how that part of that development came about through the OSI layering and like the TCP/IP stack model, which is
Mhm.
like it doesn't really have anything to do with perception mechanics whatsoever, but it is uh, a great kind of example of this carrier stacking and agent communication between layers, right? Like you've got physical layers, but then you've got data link layer, right, where you've got a NIC, network interface card, and a network interface card, both having agencies and sending and receiving signals on a stack, right? And then passing it up to
Yeah.
your network layer, to your TCP/IP. So you've got little segments of physical wire held together with network interface cables, once you add the third layer, now you're jumping, these are routers in between these little wires segments. Now you're having a transmission of data across the world, right? It's
Yeah.
a great case example
That
for
was,
that.
yeah, well, that's where it was ultimately derived from. So when we looked at the fourth one out, structure, and when we looked at that treatment of the nexus, um, right, with
Mm-hmm.
units, connections, transferences,
And
and
Nexus.
nexuses, yeah, we ended up having ultimately the exact same thing, and it's a great way to
Right.
stay in shape.
Right. Um,
So yeah, so that became the underlying the tissue, if you will, of everything we were
so,
talking about.
so I think with each Nexus, you're having a new layer in that the OSI,
Of
like
course.
in that type of
Yes.
thinking.
Yes. Nexus and unit become one and the same.
Right.
So
So you're
that's the
having a
connect
unit
the
like
looping mechanism.
a I can't remember what it's called, PDU, physical data unit or whatever, are um, getting wrapped up into protocol such that something higher is getting embedded and packaged into it. But this is going across nexuses, you could say, or across unit
Yeah.
types. Right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is the Holonic um, structure or model is already it's apparent. You can see it everywhere if you want to, and that's what we roll with because it can explain or be used to model pretty much anything top to bottom. There's nothing that escapes that as far as I know. I don't know. That's a pretty general statement, but
Well, we actually show this using the whole stacking model, right? The ultimate. What I never really elaborated like the car diagram thing
right,
to the point of where it shows a really good example of how it should be like how how complex it will get in practice. Like it just shows two
right.
stacks, right?
Yeah, it's as
But
if there's a simple
every
communication going horizontal, but it
yeah,
doesn't.
but you gotta yeah, what you gotta imagine here is like an entire landscape of where these stacks just like keep rising, and then with it stacks within stacks within stacks within stacks within stacks, and so on and so forth.
Right.
It's like and on top of stacks on top of stacks, right? Like there is no like it's in every which way, much like it's a fractal sort of situation, and all of these
Mm-hmm.
things like sending like these resonance fiat communication messages, right? Um, which go through the underlying mediums, and then whenever the resonance is doing horizontally, and whether what it's doing vertically could be potentially two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like it has two different significant meanings. So all of this is involved, and of course, we're looking at complexity of climbing back up a stack. We're not looking at the simple stack. We're looking at all of these derivations already
Right.
in a very complicated manner.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, and
so that's the real picture
when you say
behind the diagram.
fractal, it makes me kind of think about and appreciate how just because you have communication at one layer up here, like just because our Zoom meeting is sending data packets and we're having voice, it doesn't mean that the mind linearly wants to think that that's what the whole stack is for. It's for that, but no, our packets are getting inserted into an absolute like fire hose of data that's going everywhere, and this tiny little needle
Yeah,
gets threaded through, and then that's our little slice, right?
yeah. And so when we get into say like this, the more quote unquote esoteric subjects like quote magic, like we're talking about like the horizontal transfers of the data. When we go when we start to go say the scientific route, we start to discuss the vertical translations. So we can actually we can actually there keep the two sort of perpendicular to one another,
Mm-hmm.
or
So
orthogonal is the
by
word.
vertical, are you talking about like excavating the stack, like going down into things that you don't need to, like to kind of see what it's
So
made of,
no,
or?
no, it's when you have a coding in two disconnected stacks, right? On some kind of shared underlying medium. So
Mm-hmm.
for instance, you and I are two different people. We're disconnected on a physical basis. We have to utilize voice, and let's assume we're in the same room. We would have to utilize, like, say, sound waves, like the sound wave medium to translate English and thoughts and all of those elements into something useful. So that's the vertical, scientifically understandable
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant too, I
and
think.
but the actual message, yeah, the actual,
Mm-hmm.
sorry,
It's all good.
but the actual message that I'm telling you, like the meaning of the message, right? The fact that we're talking about this model, all of that, things that got that get brought together via the protocol that we're both running in our heads called English, that we're both running in our heads called the model, all of these different layers of protocoling that we're connecting on, mirroring each other on,
Mm-hmm.
right? That gives us a horizontal way of transmission of
Right.
information.
Yeah, and the horizontal way is like agent to
Mm,
agent, kind of like as if
yeah.
you're talking to yourself, kind of.
Yeah. So this is where you'd have those esoteric concepts like magic and whatever else that I was half jokingly, half seriously talking about. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's where that is. Fiat is basically the technical term that we use for what's happening there, and it's a
Right.
fundamental mechanism
Yeah, and
of
there's
how that works.
so there's that isomorphism between the model in our head and reality at large, and there's also hyperstition that happens as a matter of course when you think of an idea, a thought, and there's always this virtual reality sort of in your head, and then it kind of cascades out into the world, right? You have this
Hmm.
picture, and then it you kind of force your idea onto reality, but you get feedback coming back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so magic. How are we defining that one again? Like typically
So magic
manipulation
would
of
be
will.
the success. So casting a spell, right, would be like the sending out of the message with a particular intention on your part, and
Right.
having the resonance happen on the other end such that you have the exact effects that you were desiring by that message. So that is like that is that
Right.
manipulation of will.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
hold on.
I think you're still muted. If you try to unmute. I cannot hear you. It says mute on Zoom. Your Zoom muted. So yeah, the manipulation of will. That was kind of my, uh, or not my, but the typical kind of definition that you would get, and it seems like the way that we're defining magic is more like everything is magic, like just that this having a model in your head and um, enacting it. So you have a model of reality and how it works, and you yourself are part of that model in space and time. And so you have an objective, this hyperstitious goal or objective, some object that you wish um, to bring into existence, into the world. Um, and this would be like, this is normal life. That's what people do.
All right. I
So,
got to exist in the world and cook some
yeah,
bacon,
you got to do some magic.
some magic bacon,
Right
bacon to
on.
bacon.
Yeah, man, you can just feel free
So
to stay in the chat and just come back whenever you want.
Yeah, I'm going to mute and pause my video, obviously, but
Yeah.
I'll be running the actual live stream, so I can at least hear what you're saying
Right.
and pay attention on
Yeah,
that way.
cool. Right on, buddy. Yeah, so magic as um, kind of an everyday thing, I guess, as something that people do, um, just as the matter of having a model inside your head, and that
Hey,
that
buddy, can you mute
idea.
yourself on can you mute yourself on Zoom so that I can have a
Oh,
clear
oh yeah. So
YouTube
you're getting two.
sound?
Yep. So I
Yeah, I
can
don't want.
let's see. Wait, that's my mute button. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So I think probably we just got the stream coming through now. Yeah. So
Can you mute yourself on Zoom?
I did, didn't I?
Nope.
Oh, like through the program. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I. Oh wait. Gotcha. Mute. There we go. That's probably better.
Nice, nice. You
That'll
can't
work.
hear anything.
All right. Cool. Cool, buddy. Sweet. Yeah, so when people think about magic or hear about it, it's always like this far off, fantastical thing, and like, how do you get into it? And it's always seems to be presented as something that's um, mystical. I think that's probably a good word. Um, that it has to be mystical. That it certain that whatever you're doing has to be like obfuscated in weird rituals, and you have to find some hard to find items or something like that and put them together. Um, but really, I think what that kind of stuff is doing is building up the so you have an intention of something you want to do, um, and with those kinds of mystical rituals or whatever, you're building up a track history of that goal objective, so kind of saying to your subconscious mind that you've already put in so much effort to obtain these weird artifacts or something, and then so now it's going to work because you've put your intention into this thing, but you've also gotten put together some weird ritual or ritual objects and all that. And so that's kind of the I mean, there is probably a lot of value to that, and I personally would love to kind of like, I don't know if you would call that like enchanting your magical practice or whatever, but that's a word that seems to fit. Just giving that kind of like sparkly quality to it, like there's something more than just mundane to what you're doing. And but the premise here, I guess, is that everything that we're doing is always magical um, if we are moving through the world with intention and having goals and intentions, and um, kind of thoughts coming up about like passivity, because a lot of people don't, and I guess it's kind of our culture and the commodification of life and all that we tend to be passive and just kind of let things happen to us. And like, how magical is that really? Like, is there any magic in that? And I think probably no. Like, maybe at the apex of commodification of all life, like perhaps magic is completely drained, and enchantment is maybe drained out of the whole life stack. Um, so it seems that there's definitely an active, uh, kind of like an active participatory requirement to magic, or magic that I'm interested in, um, and and probably still, um, this probably still speaks to that, that most of what we do is kind of magical. But then, I'm kind of thinking like modern times, and all this commodification deal, like maybe that's not so true anymore, and maybe we do need to, or could, maybe this is part of what we're talking about, is re-enchanting and returning magic into our world. So I'm going to go to back to the tabletop here, just to kind of like, just to give an example. So, or to kind of like show more broadly like what kind of things we're talking about here. So when we have a model in our mind of like, which we always do, or we always, so like think of think of yourself as like through the layers, like you're in an environment, you're an organism, you're a being walking around. In some senses, you're kind of separate from your environment. You have membranes, you have skin, and all this kind of stuff. So you're kind of separating yourself somewhat, I guess mentally or ideologically, from the environment naturally, in having this sense of a self. So going up more into our neurological being, our neurological operating system. We always are being presented with this sort of like a virtual reality. So I know that, of course, a lot of people, and it's kind of like just a natural stance. You don't always have to go into a deep meditation about everything, and you can kind of think, oh yeah, like, reality is real, everything around you is real. But if you think about it logically, or more rationally, you're being presented through your senses, right? So it's easy to try and or to be kind of fooled by the mind to mistaking this presentation for reality itself. So that's just kind of what I'm trying to evoke here, is that realization of a separation, or a manifold between the where the senses kind of end and where like raw kind of reality starts, or whatever. This is not a cut and dried line or delineation or anything like that, but to kind of elaborate on this concept, and this concept of magic, and having a model of reality, it helps to kind of get into this type of meditation, to realize that we have a correspondence within our neurological operating system, which is in real time, that is within the context of our being in an environment, our organism in an environment, being constantly updated as to what we should sense or feel is existing at the moment, right? And that existence is sort of presented to us via this neural operating system, as a visually it's it's easy to see, to understand that as like objects, like there's a card here, so like I'll hold up a card on the tabletop. Now an object has come into your awareness more than it was before, so it was just kind of a background thing sitting here, but now, anyways, this is presented to you as somehow significant, just because in the context of you watching a screen or whatever and seeing it happen, or if you stop watching your screen and look around you, you're seeing objects, they come up. If you turn your head, there's a different set of objects that are coming up, right? And so what I'm trying to evoke here, as some of you maybe have the idea already and kind of understand. Others are like, what is he talking about? Like, is there, like, of course everything's real, or what, I can't even imagine like what to not get it is. But suffice to say that okay, here's another one. Your brain is sitting in a dark, wet skull, right? If you think that that's where your thoughts are happening, then how do you reconcile the fact that you are in pitch blackness right now, right? But yet you're receiving signals, right? So through these signals, your brain is putting together this image of reality, right? So that's kind of like, that's something I think you have to keep in mind if you want to like kind of understand this model of magic and what we're trying to do here. So so there is a quality aspect to that. So like the models that are mined are putting together at any one point may or may not be what we could call accurate, or they're never perfect. They're always towards some kind of ideal, right? So it's something that we should always be kind of mindful of. So I'm just trying to charge my phone here. Okay, good. So this is something that the neural operating system already does. In that's what I'm about to try and show you here. So I'm trying to create an isomorphism in your mind, first off, between your neural operating system, what you're being presented with as reality because you're conscious, and the existence around you. So there's an isomorphism between those. They have to correlate, otherwise, if a baseball comes flying at your face but your mind doesn't think it's a baseball, or it thinks it doesn't care, or whatever, there's going to be pain, right? And lessons learned and all that. Or maybe that's the case of a malfunctioning, I guess, who maybe you just got hit in the head moments before, right? Malfunctioning neural OS. So you're always having this correspondence between reality and the neural OS. And so what we're developing here is to again to introduce another isomorphism, and that's between the neural operating system, so this reality that you're being presented with, and a spread of cards, right? So we've got a tabletop, and a tabletop can support, it's physically limited due to space, right? So we're being constrained. This is a different type of medium than the brain and the neurology and memory and all that kind of stuff. It's much more limited in that we can't just kind of acrobatically flip between contexts and everything like that. It's kind of much more static, right? So, but this is kind of like our main, I guess you could say, one of our main products that we've been working on. And so there is a software version in the works, actually two software versions. So we've got under the Portal Mountain umbrella, we have what we call the dashboard software. So this is a heavily constrained piece of software. We've also got what I'll just call the AO for now, which is basically an attempt to have this kind of a tabletop layout with cards on the computer, right? Whether or not it's quote unquote isomorphic to the neural OS and all that kind of stuff, which shouldn't matter in some senses, because any media we can come and introduce our own constraints. So so by using cards, because of course we can write anything on a card that we want to, Literally anything can be written on it. It can be used in any way. That we've had this idea with us for a long time, 5+ years within the network, that we've been using cards and this kind of deck protocol, but we've never really been able to nail it down how to properly use cards. But that's been kind of the ongoing, one of the ongoing objectives, at least, especially from my perspective, because what this opens up is a way of communicating. So what we're doing is mind mapping. So by having a tabletop here, and putting cards out there, the cards reflect what's in our inner mind, like the neural operating system. What we're being presented with, we're trying to communicate that to others so that we can potentially bootstrap certain behaviors, or through teaching, education, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and just thinking back, like 4 years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, when we started with the team, this is when we began working with index cards, and we just knew that we needed a medium that's kind of ubiquitous, that anybody can get a hold of. In other words, pen and paper. But we want this to be able to mediate communication between individuals as peers, but in the context of something bigger. And that something bigger is what we call, now we call it a proximity guild. Back then we called it a cluster. And it's basically when you have a number of people together, or we could call them neural units if you want, and they are trying to agree on, so through on a peer-to-peer basis, they're trying to come to terms and agree on behavior in order to work together as community. So in other words, in cases where you don't have a kind of like a corporate context where everybody's employed and everybody's taking on this identity in that they're attached to a manager and the manager is telling them what to do. We take that, and this is commodification of all life. This is the commodification of maintenance of an environment, organism in an environment. Management as an external service, right? We're kind of re-internalizing that, and of course it's it's nothing new or unprecedented, and I think throughout history it's been always there. There's always been this idea of community, and even though the government didn't tell you, or the corporation didn't tell you that you have to cooperate with your neighbor on a fence or a shed or something like that, or whatever it is, you anyways of your own will just magically cooperated with somebody else to make something happen, right? And so this is kind of what we're interested in, isolating and bringing up back into the culture in which it's been almost completely obliterated, wiped out completely. And replaced with time management and corporate authority and all the things that I think people can easily identify as negative impact, negative aspects of their life that they may feel out of control, or like that they don't have a lot of control, or that the existing institutional structures are just severely constraining them in what they can or cannot do. That's all because of due to this process of commodification of all life. And so that's been ongoing, and I think just slowly over time we've lost this kind of capacity to relate to each other and as peers, right? And so that's what we're bringing back, or we're trying to bring back. We're just doing our little part here to make sense of our own little world, and of course with acknowledgement that what we do can be shared, and as we're talking here, flocked behavior can be flocked among peers. So this ability to mind map, to isomorphically even just speak your mind, which is what I'm doing right now, just kind of verbally giving concepts and that. This is fortunately or unfortunately kind of ephemeral in that it's here and gone, right? So it is being recorded, but it's not a as far as encountering those artifacts again, one would have to go to YouTube or download the video or whatever to replay it, right? So we want something that's very quick, very easy to just pull up, grab yourself a blank card and a pen, and write something down, right? And then you place that something into your environment, and you come back later and read it, right? So the index card just seems to fit that bill very well. So this is kind of the why of, I guess, of why I use that format and how it came about. And so how this extends magic is if we can figure out how to constrain the writing that we do to more proper forms that correspond better with our experience of reality that the neural operating system presents to us, then we can have these cards kind of slot themselves into our understanding. So, for example, if I have a goal that, like say I want to start a company, I could write that down on a card, and that would kind of isomorphically represent that company object coming into being. And every time I encounter that object in my environment, I'm being reminded, right? And so we have the possibility for a recurrence through time and space, which builds and builds the hyperstation until the object comes into existence, right? And that's the magic, I guess. That's an example of the magic that we're talking about. And so, talking about enchantment, all these things that we do. I mean, it as far as like the tabletop, like I made a special board for this, just as a prototype of one way, right? But using this as a tabletop kind of makes it a bit more significant to me. Also, as I've shown on the stream before, having the deck of cards in a special box, right, in a special place. I think we might be losing video a bit. Hopefully the audio is coming through. Just the usual Wi-Fi issues around here. But anyways, so having this magical Zettelkasten to contain these cards as a place in my environment, I'm not going to lose the cards because they're in their special box, right? And this box is kind of like an extension of my mind in a way, right? And so work was put into this. It is enchanted, as you can see. And that kind of makes it more special. But and this, in being more special, it's kind of helped to motivate me to develop this system, right? So this box is is years old now, and yeah, so that's a part that I don't have a lot of experience with, is in enchanting or enchantedness of magic, and it's kind of like not really my specialty, not my forte, I guess. Probably Zhenya's even less. But when we take artifacts like this and make them more special, they become more significant to us, and we can use this to build up steam, if you will, to make something more powerful as it goes along, hyperstitionally. And yeah, so I was just taking a look at the time here. So we're at about 45 minutes, which time is not flying for me right now, which is kind of cool. I feel like I'm in a slow-mo pocket of reality here. So where I wanted to go with this stream, of course, is to get into more practical, more concrete examples of this deck program. In other words, what we were talking about with Jenny there, how you can, so imagine within your own neural operating system, or within your own conscious perception that's being presented to you. Imagine an overlay of your, like for example, my tasks or a to-do. So this to-do would be in a little box in maybe the top right of your vision, like just imagine as a virtual reality overlay. And right, so you've got it you can either write it on a card, or you can have it imagine that, okay, I know I have to do this, I have to do this. Let's say you have 5 things to do today. If you want to make sure that you're not going to forget those things, you may write them down, right? And so instead of being in taking up some space in your VR overlay that your NeuralOS presents to you, you can take that into an isomorphic expression onto a card. So this would be what I would call to-do protocol, in order to create an object element that's part of this deck program overlay. Would be the process of taking everything that you need to do today and just writing it down, making a list. Then you have it in a card, and now you could kind of say it's like part of, it's something you want to keep as like a heads up display over like what you're doing. You always want to kind of return to it. And so there are many places you could potentially put this to-do list. I'm just going to grab a pen. Just to illustrate. So you'd have like to-do, and then it's whatever it is, April 18. So anytime you come back to this artifact, you're going to know what it's for, because in the title section, we've iterated the relevant data. Right away we know it's a to-do list. It's nothing complicated. And then ideally, I think, we're going to list off, with check boxes, live stream, whatever else I want to do today, eat dinner. So as you do these things, you'll check them off, right? So I'm just kind of like thinking about Portal Mountain as in the context of like this isomorphic overlay to reality that kind of helps us bootstrap a more isomorphic overlay. That probably doesn't make sense, but anybody who doesn't really, just you kind of casually navigate reality and think about things as we normally do, of course, you know what a goal is, you know what a task is, you know what a to-do list is, right? But the ways that these relate to each other can become muddy or foggy, cloudy. If you have a number of goals at once, the order in which you do things may shift or change around depending on some things may take priority. So there is really a kind of programmatic aspect to this that I think happens very naturally and automatically, and fairly complete to anybody who functions, I guess, as what we'd call a normal human being. We're doing this kind of stuff subconsciously, but if we bring it up into the conscious and either try to have this overlay within our imagination, right? Just imagining a to-do list, or various other, imagining a program list of programs that you're running. Like you may be cleaning the house, what you might be doing. You could have a sub-program for washing the dishes. Whatever it is, like we don't normally acknowledge the fact that as we move through a household doing tasks, that we are actually taking on and putting off different hats, if you will. That's a common analogy to roles or identities. But you're a dishwasher, and now you're a cook, and now you're a sweeper, a janitor, a custodian, whatever I don't know. Those things are kind of like corporate context, but you get the idea. Like you could have this overlay, and this is, I think, probably where a lot of productivity suites are going. Like I just to throw that phrase out there. When, like, just thinking about, like, when your computer keeps track of what tasks you have to do and what schedules you have and all this kind of stuff, it doesn't have, like, the way that this paradigm has been done is a very static thing that doesn't change, but our context is always changing. We're always, if we're at home or work, our list of tasks and our things that we should be presented with should be vastly different, right? And so this is kind of like the area that we're bumping into when we think about a magical virtual reality overlay, an augmentation of the neural operating system, which can function either as a crutch to help bootstrap more isomorphic processes, like getting into better habits of doing things, which is probably one main kind of function, but or just keeping track of reminders and daily life and reminding of context. Like if you move into a different room, your context changes, and the kind of things that you may be doing there would be different than the other room, right? Living room or kitchen, completely different. But so I'm just kind of like imagining it. We're not at the point of technological implementation with, like what you could do is like with a watch, a wrist computer or whatever that tracks your movement in and out of different rooms and kind of reminds you of things you have to do here, or it keeps track of your GPS position where you are if you're at home or work, and is always giving you different, you look at it and it's kind of telling you what you already know as a reminder, I guess, of like, all the things, your commitments, your objectives, your goals, you're down to what tasks have to be done, that kind of thing, schedule, your schedule of your peers, all this kind of stuff. So life, I guess, becomes very complex and complicated, potentially, and it, well, of course it does in modern days, but it could get easier to deal with if we kind of can manage it better with what we're talking about here, mind mapping, basically isomorphic mind mapping. And this is kind of, so this is an underpinning of, so what we were talking about before, how peers can get together and work together to do something, some objective. So now they're part of a proximity guild together, right? And so it's one thing to organize yourself, but when you have others, and when you want to establish policy, when you want to establish values, what kind of values are going to be upheld within the context of this relationship and any number of objects and all that. This is a way of bootstrapping that and kind of supercharging it so that it becomes extremely intentional, so that it puts in a explicit feedback loop, so that instead of just assuming that we agree on things, we explicitly put them out there and then try to work with that. So we work with the systems that we create, how we describe. So we describe our guild, the certain protocols to be used, not just the to-do protocol, but it's going to be like, if you're sharing a garden, there's watering protocols and all kinds of constraints that have to be maintained. You don't want to step on things. So we can explicitly put these agreements out there, and then whenever problems happen, instead of just yelling and saying, "Oh, I thought you knew about this or that," well, has it been explicit? Which is, in other words, is it fair to everybody that it's been definitely expressed or explained? And then if it has been, then, we can kind of help to bootstrap that behavior in a more productive way, right? But as things become developed, the complexity of the understanding and agreements between peers can kind of develop, depending on what domain they're dealing with. If it's gardening or whatever, there's, all kinds of different factors with gardening, like what time should you plant things, when should you harvest, what should you look for, what kind of diseases and problems. That's just one little domain which could benefit from a more intentional feedback process. And then, so the idea of this system of guilds, so you not only just you and your buddies or whatever making a garden, but let's say people you don't know, or through a few degrees of separation you don't know, maybe they should or could want to benefit from the processes that you've, or processes and protocols that you've refined, and they can start with we call it, I guess, a starter deck to bootstrap their new garden, right? So they don't have to start from scratch. And this is kind of the idea of it. And this is like thinking back 4 or 5 years ago, like just thinking like, man, nobody knows what we're doing. Like, as far as peer-to-peer, we're just dropped off in the middle of the ocean. Like, there's not even land. The process of commodification is so far gone that we don't know what we're doing unless we're told, to a great extent. I mean, as far as core behaviors that matter to the organism and life existence and all this kind of stuff, what we've described through the plateaus of commodification. So that's very very explicit, what we basically don't have any idea about because it's been mediated. Some of us, of course, when things get mediated out as a service and a product through the marketplace, people do know the proper ways of doing things. And so this is one of the kind of frustrations that got me, is like, we know the best ways to be doing things, but why is that knowledge not shared? It's not shared because the major context of society is the corporation, which is competing with one another and do not want to share that kind of stuff. They consider this to be the corporation and management of that corporation in competition considers this type of information should not be shared, because you'll be helping your competitors. And why would you do that when you could just expand yourself and be more capable yourself? So it's a completely different sort of paradigm. And so this system came about of having that feeling like we are seemingly lost and helpless as far as being able to relate to one another as peers and getting things done. Even with, I mean, we have access to Google and YouTube, we can do searches, we can find out how to do almost anything, but it's almost like information overload. Just getting a thought here, of course, Huxley, about there being simply too much information that nobody even cares about the truth because there's so much other distraction and everything like that. So there's just a flood of information that it's hard even to find what is really the best way to do gardening and that. And so that kind of stuff makes you wish for, of course, a web of trust. So you don't want to just go to Google or YouTube and ask. You want to ask somebody who knows, hey, what's the best source? And they can send you to this website or that video. At least you know that it's the best stuff. So how does this best stuff, how do these links get sort of aggregated and refined together? And they do it through a web of trust. That's because everyone's going to say, oh, my information is the best. Every corporation is going to say their method is the best. But it's always going to come down to your friends, your peers, your family, people that you talk directly to. So if you're at gardening and you see someone else gardening, that's kind of like an opportunity to share information in a way that's in context, right? And of course, the web of trust is a context as well. If you know somebody who's a gardener and you trust them, then you can narrow down very quickly what information is the best. So that's kind of like, I'm just kind of trying to paint a bigger picture here of the context of the system of guilds in which this kind of a card mind mapping system would work to facilitate the bootstrapping of isomorphic behavior, which deals with a lot of the problems that like that I just threw my hands up in the air. I'm like, why don't we have this information? Why am I helpless? Why don't I know anything? Why doesn't anybody know anything? Meanwhile, there's so much information out there, right? So on that note, we're at the 1 hour mark. I'm just going to hit a quick break here. And we'll continue on. I think I'm probably going to just maybe elaborate a bit more on the structure here of the VR overlay, the deck program, the different card types, so the elements, what we may put down onto a tabletop, and as well as like kind of in practice practical questions about like, okay, so I'm at a garden, where's the tabletop, right? Like, where is the shared this shared space, physical space for things to happen. Okay, and so in those cases, it might be easier to be like a virtual tabletop, shared online, that kind of stuff. So, or even multiple tabletops, definitely multiple decks happening within an environment. So yeah, hopefully get into a bit more of that kind of practical side of this when we're back. So be right back. All right, we're back. Yeah, so that's a whole bunch of context, I guess, and we kind of linked where we started this live stream up, kind of early, our discussion there with Shenya about getting into about magic. This is really a sort of magical system of facilitating kind of people to network and peer with each other. So this is what I guess we were missing, sort of, those 4 or 5 years ago. Was the constraints necessary for, I guess, a more proper communication, a more isomorphic communication, so that the thoughts that we have in our head and our experience of perception mechanics and how that works can be more can be sort of like well described into a different medium. And so this is the Zettelkasten game, as I've called it. We just call it the card game sometimes, a deck protocol or deck program. And so, even though we've been kind of developing this for years, there's been so much work that had to kind of go into just even understanding like the foundations, the fundamentals of how to do that. And so through this live stream series since November, I think we've gone over probably all, I would say almost all of our work in a great detail in this kind of massive arc. And there's just been so much over the, like it's been 3 or 4 years working on Portal Mountain, and I'm just thankful that it's becoming describable, we're becoming much more coherent. Any of our previous, I guess, even my previous series from a year ago was nowhere near here. I did like a media expression project. Can't remember what it was called, something like that. But just kind of flowing over all of my ideas and everything that I think about and like why this should matter for people. It's kind of an incoherent mass, but so this last series, I'm very kind of thankful that we've had been able to dedicate the time. So yeah, that's a big shout out to our families. Just to accommodate, and so we were doing once every week, but that quickly got out of hand, and so once every 2 weeks we've been getting together and just going through. I think we've almost covered like all the theoretical and fundamental kind of stuff that we've hit every topic pretty much in pretty great detail. The thing is that it just keeps unfolding and developing though, so that's why like every live stream we do, pretty much when it's like when we've kind of concluded, it's not even the next day that something else pops in our head, like why don't we talk about this, or get into more, like, it's just the fractal kind of unfolding. But yeah, it's kind of neat to just be monologuing too right now. Like usually it's been, I guess, probably the whole time Jenny and I in conversation. So it definitely helps to have somebody conversing with you. The chat has helped out a little bit. The Portal Mountain chat, shout out there. We've had a few times where we get some feedback going, but I don't know if it's not a great time for everybody, but the point is, when you have somebody to back and forth and ask questions and that kind of stuff, it's it seems to really help. But on the other hand, you can get far off track. So like, and I'm even thinking about like talking with Zhenya here, I always seem to have very concrete idea or place in my head anyways, like where I want to go like with this, and you can see that coming out a lot.
I'm not too far away, by the way.
Oh yeah. See, but that's all you've given me. Now what? He's not too far away. So yeah, cool. Jenny, I guess, is having supper, probably listening to me rant away.
Yo, unmute yourself on Zoom. I muted you on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Unmute. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good.
YouTube is like 20 seconds behind, so like you were just giving shout outs to like all the families and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Milk it.
Yeah, man.
Milk it.
Just trying to appreciate.
All right, let's see. I got Zoom's volume sucks. But...
See, now right away you just proved my point, because we're gonna get far off track of what I had in mind.
No, keep going.
Yeah, so I was saying about like I was calling it sprinting towards the deck protocol, deck program, and that's where I think it kind of showed up a lot in many of the latest live streams. So, yep. So you can just give me the thumbs up there, Zhenya, or I can keep monologuing, or you can jump back in. Maybe just let me wrap up for a bit. Let me just wrap.
I figured if you want me to jump in, just ask an actual question. That
Yeah.
way it's not all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So at least I know I have one person watching. Also, I could check YouTube. Let's see. Well, there's been a peak of 4, including me, so a peak of 3 people at once watching. That's cool. Thanks, peeps. Wait, you're on the stream though, Shen. Just so you know. So if you're picking your nose there, I can
No,
turn.
I didn't do that. Scratching my nose.
Right.
It looks very similar. I'm aware.
Not to be confused. All right. Anyways, but I'm gonna turn actually your video off there. That's cool. Whatever. Since you don't need to be. Yeah, just sprinting towards deck protocol. So that's cool. But monologuing is a very different thing, and even so, it's good to know that people are watching or listening. Kind of gives you the motivation. Like, at least you can kind of imagine that, somebody, like, you're explaining it to somebody. Like, I don't know. It's kind of weird to monologue to yourself without the idea of at least somebody else watching it. And I guess maybe that's why live streaming is cool. But Yeah, so just we have been through a lot of a revision and update, change, development in our understandings of just of what we've been describing. Always are being like reinvented as it goes, because every time you even try to describe something, it more peels off, and you just kind of your imagination gets shot in so many directions. But it's good to be able to sprint towards deck protocol and or deck program, if you prefer. And it's been, I guess, very difficult for me, and I know that we've had to kind of develop the theory, and this is kind of to that point. We've just had to the fundamentals had to be laid, right? Like, even if you can get a wild vision and flight of images or whatever, it's much different than having a product, right? So when you've got a product, it's like the context of what we're doing now is so full and so filled in that we can start talking about a deck program on a tabletop using index cards and mind mapping the neural OS or the social OS. Yeah, probably be more accurate. Whatever. Whatever parts that we want to mind map there, and even go into this guild organizational functionality. So and that's bringing it back to again 4 or 5 years ago, when it's like, okay, I want to operate as a peer and have a guild and do cool things, but how can I explain this to anybody else, right? So the people who already know that, who are in the peer-to-peer mindset, if you will, already awakened to that, quote unquote, they don't really need to be bootstrapped into it because they're already sensing the carrier and functioning correctly on it with their agent stack. The problem becomes when you want to establish this relationship as the core of an organization, which bootstraps that agent stack, the agency of that stack, to new members or to anybody who kind of comes towards the guild, to whatever that environment or domain of behavior that you're doing. So yeah, putting it all together, now we can drop this game on the tabletop and have it in such a context that we can show how it satisfies that need from years ago, which is we're having this, what we call the cluster, and how do you organize with people when I guess the first problem you run into is most of the people don't know what the hell they're doing, or are, we all don't know what the hell we're doing, but in regards to this, they don't see the system of guilds as a structure. They don't see how that works. They don't know how to interact with it. Therefore, whatever they're doing does not facilitate the guild as a global organizational type structure. You're not feeding into it if you don't understand it. So how do you bootstrap it? And that's the agent. That's the agency stack, which is already established in membership coherence, and this is so utilizing techniques to educate and get that agency stack up and running in others. And so this card medium, I guess, is just seems like the perfect way of doing that, because it does allow for mind mapping. It allows for storage. It's cheap. Like, there's many constraints that it doesn't break just by what it does. So it potentially could
Well,
work.
it's also like
Yeah.
the most basic, right? Like, if you think,
Like
if you think
paper,
about
pen and
when
paper.
writing came about, right?
Yep.
Writing came about like 10,000 years ago or so. It probably
It's
emerged
old
in
school.
bits and pieces before. But the
Mhm.
point being is that the card game is more reflective of like one of the most basic original mediums with which we used to
Right.
navigate this. So it
Hmm.
only makes sense for it to be like so like duh kind
Yeah.
of.
Back to basics. Not complicated. Yeah, so like everything we've gone through, all of these charts, um, different diagrams, like these are just giving a model to bootstrap an understanding of a facet of organization of people in a society, right? Like this is just the natural holarchy, environment, organism, neural OS, social OS. So with all this work and all these charts, um, we have this massive picture painted, and it just keeps unfolding, but there's definitely a huge, like, a core there, and even the products in like the charts themselves, like you can download it and look at it, try to interpret it. um, these are artifacts that are replicating on through media seamlessly over the internet and all that. um, and this is kind of why I kind of drive towards products, because the Huxleyan problem, I guess, information overload, is that we now have 40 plus hours of this video since November of 2020, it now being mid-April 2021. This kind of overload, right? So, and we can say, yeah, we know that we to ourselves in our own conversation, to our own satisfaction, we have discussed these topics in a way that we think, almost not could be a book, but like the basis for something. Like we went here and there and talked about this and that. That we've painted a picture, enough of the picture, of the core of the picture, to bootstrap this Portal Mountain, right? Um, but kind of like one of my points there was that you kind of need these products as well as like a very condensed and highly mimetically fluid, if you will, easily replicable artifacts that condense all of this, so nobody has to sit through 40 hours of video. What they could understand by interacting in 4 minutes with a product, right? Then they just see the whole thing is right there, right? And that's kind of like the favor that we should be doing to our quote-unquote customers, or anybody interested in Portal Mountain, is always be condensing it down into product format. Although, I mean, in our defense, we've been driving hard towards that the whole time. It's just that it hasn't been there yet, for obvious self-evident reasons, which we are not to blame for. Yeah, so that's just funny. Just kind of like side commentary. I know Zhenya gets what I'm talking about. Yep. Yep. So, sprinting towards products brings up an interesting topic of agile development through feedback and creation of things that are just good enough to do something, right? And then go from there. So like the agile philosophy, I guess, if you will, would be like to say, oh, we should have just made this card game like 4 years ago or 3 years ago, just done something and then made it better, right? And like, who knows where that leads? Like, that's kind of well, I do know where it leads because that's what I've been doing in previous contexts as well, like I was saying with the team cluster. But would be nice. I mean, maybe that's kind of where the sprint idea comes to my mind, is that we just have to get some products down because it becomes easily replicable and things become more obvious. So I guess maybe it's all a kind of side topic of that that nagging thought of people. Why doesn't it make sense? Make more sense. Where's your bibliography?
It's funny that you're saying that because one of the assumptions in that question is that the bibliography is the sense making.
Is what makes sense for, yeah.
Yeah, like some abstract
Right.
list of sources is
Right.
the only thing that makes sense, but that's not the
Yeah.
case. It's literally like what we're saying is not the case.
So,
In
yeah.
order for it to be heard, the irony of the situation is that in order to be heard about this point, they want sources on it. We're
Mhm.
saying that it's not about sources.
Yeah.
What's your source on that?
This is another aspect of that courtesy we should do to our customers, if you will, is if we know of equivalencies or whatever, they're not equivalencies, but like what established system of thought or philosophy lines up already with stuff like that. We could say, okay, I see there's isomorphisms here. The reason for doing that is because some people have read thousands of books and they don't have time for any shit and they don't care for any number of reasons, but they firmly believe that whatever you're talking about is at the same level, if not or below, of whatever existing literature you could possibly try to bring up. And so to the kind of credit of why this is
Just
important
for a
to
second.
is for
Hold on, just-
bootstrapping. Yep.
There's another subtle mistake that's being made cognitively in this process, in that it attributes knowledge to memory. It basically makes the equivalent statement that these things are equivalent, and that's probably that's actually a cognitive mistake.
Knowledge and memory being equated.
Yeah, knowledge is something that is working, right? It's a working. It's something that is. It's not something that's like written down somewhere. It's the exercise of. It could be, but it's the exercise of taking that encoding and actually decoding it into activity.
Right. So
Thought.
here's my like critique of, I guess, is like, if you have any idea or inkling of what system of thought somebody else has in their head, why don't you just put something out there and see if they know their shit on that system or not? Right? Like in other words, if this is about, if we're going to describe things, carrier stacks with agency and agent communication, if somebody is trying to bootstrap agency at a certain level, and you think like maybe you do, like do you do or you don't have that agency on your own level, right? Like there's this kind of testing process and bootstrapping, so it's like it can't be the fault of the agent which is presenting with a bootstrap for participants, right? And open to at any level that of the carrier stack to agent be like, okay, are we talking the same language? Yes or no? Can we throw ideas and our little portion of reality? Can I explain my portion of reality in this context, and you see if
But
that
are you
is
listening
good?
to understand, or are you listening to reply?
Yeah, yeah. That's the kind of thing that happens if you don't intend on doing that. If you don't want to interface with the agent carrier stack's attempts at education or whatever. Like, that's, I guess, my critique, because I think that anybody who's read so many books and understood them should have this ability of presence to kind of sense somebody else's model. Like, okay, you've got 1,000 models to peg me down on. Like, pick one. I don't care. Like whatever language you want to speak, I'll try to speak it. But right from the perspective of somebody who's read so many books and looking at these people and saying, "Oh, I don't understand you." Like, if you've got so many models, try one. But so I want to drive this point home in a embarrassingly succinct, what do you call it, explication of the point.
That's very succinct right there.
This one of our charts, we've had this for years, just of the abstract concrete divide, right? And is that not like, anybody who understands that should be able to talk shop about it, unless you're, for whatever reason, just don't even have time for amateurs or whatever your excuse that you can or can't. I won't say that judgment, but look here, we have the way that every single all of these different systems of thought are separated into two categories, two columns. One is, what do they call the abstract, and one is, what do they call the concrete. For every single system, they each have a word for abstract and concrete. Descartes, matter and mind, that's abstract and concrete. Kant, thing in itself or appearance. Heidegger, essence and existence. Whitehead, reality and process. Wittgenstein, world and language, right? So this is like a grand central nexus of how to bridge with somebody who understands the difference between abstract and concrete, and then go from there, right? Like, and why can't, if you understand that, why can't that be a more fruitful discussion into getting into the memetics of that interplay or counterplay between the abstract and the concrete, right?
It's like a Rosetta Stone right there, man.
Like, why wouldn't you do it? That's what everybody should do. But just like, why wouldn't you? Like,
Because my abstract and concrete labels are better than your abstract and concrete labels.
yeah,
And
something like that.
so on and so forth.
Yeah. Should post to SOTS and tell them to listen at the minute 35 mark. The minute or the hour and a half mark. Nothing personal, just cool stuff. But I mean this like anybody who is watching the stream or would like to understand the context of like what we're talking about with making all these charts and social descriptions of social structures and corporate structures and all of that. We also go into a lot of this kind of, I don't know what the word is for a metaphysical type. That's probably a trigger word, but stuff that isn't very concrete and that seems like it's out to lunch, but it's actually potentially just fundamental to this whole kind of system, I guess. I printed off a bunch of charts. I don't know if I'll reference them, but I did reference one of them, so I'm glad. Paid off.
You printed them?
Yeah, I printed some charts. Just, I don't know, whole bunch. Not all of them, just ones that I thought I might use today.
Your background is totally cutting them out.
Oh yeah, I have
I couldn't see anything.
we're singing the Portal Mountains national anthem. Dun 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 dun.
What are you talking about?
Portal Mountains. Well, anyways, that's where that meme came from. It's like a YouTube video of the national anthem of Portal Mountain, something like that.
That's when. When was it?
It's a meme. I thought that's what I had for my background, was all the mushroom toadstool.
Oh yes. But
They're singing. They're a bunch of patriots.
right.
Or
I think I remember
comrades.
this. Yes, I remember that now. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and then I think Joel went and looked it up on YouTube, trying to find like the Portal Mountain theme song or whatever you call it, anthem.
Did he succeed?
He couldn't find it. It was just a meme. Yep, just a meme. Cool, so we got a bit off track there with bridging, I guess. Not that there is really a track here, but I just kind of feel like kind of summarizing up and bringing together the context of the work and all that. And like why I feel like driving towards a product right now, that it should be something concrete. And ultimately something that we can monetize, I believe, service-wise, typically. As far as having an institution or a bootstrap, like in the traditional sense of an institute, a foundation for bootstrapping the guild, basically, that replicates its own structure horizontally and continues to pop up other such institutes or whatever. Like just thinking in terms of like Portal Mountain, I would say our Portal Mountain instance, you could say, like yeah. Mm-hmm. Bootstrapping the structure. There's a lot to think about, that's for sure. And so I'm just kind of getting this feeling again that often I get this like mild anxiety about developing the deck protocol or the deck program, because it's tough when things feel so ambiguous, and maybe this is a difficulty of what do you call it, agile sprinting, agile development, sprinting. It can be very uncomfortable to just try and throw prototypes out there. And
that's a symptom of anxiety, actually.
Yeah.
Because you the underlying problem is the fact that there's this expectation of the instant gratification because and we're in thought land, if you will, imagination land. Things don't take time. Things are things. They're just maps,
Sure, yeah.
mathematically
One thing
speaking.
associated with the other.
So it's all kind of like all flat and static in that sense. And so the disconnect that happens is that you're habituated to this is the instant gratification portion of it, where
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't map neatly into the real world.
Yeah, I think we all these
And
days
then
have that kind of
right,
ingrained.
exactly.
The
So
Facebook feed and whatnot.
and so the anxiety is basically part of that, and coupled with the fact that you already know you're not going to be self-gratified like
Mm.
immediately
Well, I think it comes down to
by
expectations and setting expectations.
yeah, but like your prototype, for example, you're gonna know that it's not perfect
Right.
because it's a prototype and it's all blah blah blah,
Mm-hmm.
and that gives the rise to the subtle anxiety of it like not being yet a complete thing. Why am I putting my time into it? And shouldn't I be putting my time into the right thing?
Right. Well, yeah,
There's
no.
it's a sheep pattern to it.
Understandable, yeah.
No, no,
Yeah, yeah, no,
it's
this
okay.
this work in particular, yes, like years long, and um, I've been kind of more recently realizing that, um, like trying to, I guess, set my own habits up better. That um, you need to set goals or expectations that are reasonable, can be met, like. Um, Within a certain time period, like even if you're just expecting, like, don't have that ambiguous, like, oh, the deck program is going to be a product. That's not what you can't just start working with that. You have to think, okay, I'm going to present my current, what I've got so far, and once I present what I've got so far, that's like a great accomplishment, you know right? And then you know that you're taking off a bite-sized chunk instead of just letting the thoughts spread out into ambiguity, right? Of this never-ending, like, does it or doesn't it? Is there a solution? Yeah. But I do want to get into. That's the reason I mentioned it. I do want to cover it in a bit more depth. In particular, just go what I said. Go over. Um, I laid a spread of cards out. Was it last weekend? So I kind of laid some things out of partly of what I've been talking about today, and in particular, I wanted to go through them with you, Zhenya, just so that you could see like the kind of like some of my latest thoughts on this. Also, I was going to get into some other context about tabletops and when do you need a virtual tabletop sometimes, like I mentioned. It's not always practical to just have a flat surface that is going to store your cards or whatever. Even if there is a flat surface, like a table, you don't always want to leave your cards there day and night, right? So that's like a lot of different things to think about when dealing with the media, the carrier stacks, to get this stable idea of a surface space to contain cards, right? The thing that exists. It could be on a computer, virtual, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of context that haven't really gotten into. And also a lot of just thinking over the last few years, there's that kind of thread that we could also wrap up. Just thinking, like, it's pretty amazing the all the different theoretical topics like that we've gone through this last session. I feel like definitely through the beginning of it, like since November, I wanted to drive towards just whatever you were thinking about, Chenya, like with theory, whatever was on your mind. But eventually it kept creeping up, as I was saying, like deck protocol. Like, I've got to develop this. We need products to get something physically, like, manifesting in life, right? You know, get the corporation going, start a business. Like a lot of things we've talked about. So the products are
Reify.
yeah, the products are the reification of all of this, like, theory, I guess, right? And so into the products we can embed the theory, and I think that's where a lot of the skill comes in, and that's where, you know, like, if you're kind of if you do know what you're talking about, then you should be able to translate it into product, right? It at least it's
iterate through
yeah,
through
like
its
the
development.
agile for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Because part of it is going to be the feedback from the creation of the product itself, like what
Mhm.
works, what doesn't work. There's still discovery involved.
Right.
always.
And we've had technically Portal Mountain as a product since the Telegram, like, network, right? So we've had groups on Telegram running for years now, which we've been able to utilize to further bootstrap the development of Portal Mountain itself, including, and which we've been blessed to have others join us who were able to also verify that the model that we are talking about does have a correspondence in nature through observation, confirmation. Yeah, so, like, just thinking, like, the shout outs to the family before, like, we have a Portal Mountain family too, which is really cool. Yep. And that's been just very important, I guess, to help us with the work. Just in having I guess the temperament perspective is really the main thing, and, like, what are the chances that you know, like, people that came by and were interested in Portal Mountain ended up slotting into or being more comfortable with things that we were not comfortable with. In other words, the temperament, polar opposites in temperament. Yeah, so, yeah, just thinking.
So what Vicky and I were talking about earlier, a couple of days back now,
Mhm.
how she was wondering if she's more devotional or perceptive, and I really actually found it funny reading her entire spiel on the
Right.
reason as to why she's totally devotional, and
Yeah.
everything she's saying is like completely on the perceptive side, like
Yeah.
every bit of it. And I'm like,
Agreed.
It's like, what do we? I was thinking to myself, like, what do I say here? Like, like, so, but we obviously we ended up seeing eye to eye,
Yeah, and that.
and it became a bit clear as to how the actual intertwining
Well,
goes.
this has helped so much that people will ask questions and come to their own understandings, right? So through that relationship, we end up learning about it, which has been great.
It was still a great read.
Yep.
It made my it made the moment.
1 second. Yeah, so that would be it's great to get things down into the concrete, as in products, production. Too bad I can't play elevator music any better than do 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 do. So I was just sending a text there. Something like that. Yeah. Close the window. While I step over a beer case. Kind of chilling down a bit. So products, and this is where we are at. We haven't kind of released anything on the dashboard side of things.
I have an idea for
lately.
the first product.
What's that?
Do you still brew your wine?
I know how to, but I don't. Wait, was that
Start
the
with alcohol.
advertisement?
Start with alcohol. Just. I'm joking, but that'll be funny. The first thing we start selling is booze.
Just to bootstrap the operation. Yeah, no. Well, that's kind of the truth. I guess to a great extent, this should not require money to bootstrap. Like,
I was obviously just joking.
yeah, no, I know, but it's a great point. Like, just thinking, like, sometimes I think, oh, it'd be better if, like, I had a bunch of extra money to, I don't know, something would just be better. But it really has nothing to do with Portal Mountain.
No, and as soon as investors come into the search, for example, it's like, it would go to shit.
Yeah. Well, see, all you could do is, as investors, swoop in and take ideological control of the Proximity Guild itself. As long as Portal Mountain, the institution or whatever, was propagating, right? Like, that it does suck that, and this is something that we have to think ahead to guard against, that any institution that we establish or whatever within society eventually, like everything else, gets corrupted or whatever, and it should anyways be aside from the fact of the, I don't know, it sounds dumb to say like essence or whatever, but the actual agent carrier stack is already replicating just fine out in the environment, right?
Well, I mean, it's already replicating because Portal Mountain is an incarnation of an ongoing knowledge,
Of course.
sort of realization.
Yes.
At least.
Yeah. And this is that.
Language-wise, it's unique, I guess, but it's not unique in any.
This is part of that point that's always annoying to make, in that to make the statement that, oh, it's already happening. We're just describing something that's already happening. Well, what we mean by that is we're recognizing carriers or agents in the carrier stack. That are
Convergent evolution is actually a great point to make there, where it's like you have a different species, but they're exactly the same body plan.
Yeah, that's a probably correct analogy. So something that manages still to fit into the certain environment, but is internally written in a completely different language.
I was about to say exactly that, yeah.
Yep. Yep, true story, and that's part of like the faith in the Grandmaster and all that. That you know he's working out in the world there. uh-huh. True story. Mm-hmm. So concrete product. Yeah, so before we got off there, I was just saying about the dashboard. We've released, I guess, iterations or whatever you could say, or like you've put out screenshots and this and that. There's been
I've developed a couple of
aspects
software prototypes myself.
aspects
Right?
converging, but and I'm still like, it would be interesting to get your comment, I guess, on whether you think that that is going to end up converging towards what we've been laying out with the cards, and this idea of having the VR overlay. Excuse me.
Well, it would be that overlay.
Right.
It's just going to be on a different screen than your eyes. If you will.
Mhm.
But it should. The basic test, essentially, if it's correct or not, is whether it's mapping to the same to your mental VR sort of
Right.
landscape.
Yeah. So, and as far as I know, or as far as we've really ever discussed or described it, that's what we are talking about with a dashboard-like system, is something to overlay and facilitate the magic, as I was monologuing about earlier.
Yeah, too bad I'm not. That's the thing I missed most of in any field.
Yep,
So,
but that's fine. That is fine. hmm
I know.
Yeah, like you're always thinking about filling in the blanks when you're bootstrapping. Like, I don't know what people don't know. I can kind of assume. And like, even through our live stream series, like we've had to, you kind of imagine this globulous other as having a certain understanding or whatever. But in order to bootstrap the agency, there's things that we know have to be in place, right? So it's also, even for people who understand it, it's good to know that this is the type of material that you would use to facilitate bootstrapping.
There's also in bootstrapping there's the part where you are building something up, but in our particular case, we also sometimes have to deal with things being built up that need to be unbuilt, like unlearned, essentially.
Right.
That's actually the main motivation for me
Yeah.
to
Okay,
take
so
over specific terms like self and source and all of these kinds
yes,
of weird
this
ones.
is oddly
Just
enough.
I can actually we can turn them back to the model and pinpoint how they should be reinterpreted.
Yeah, but of course, people and everybody who encounters a dissonance feels uncomfortable. So of course, we all like to feel like our environment is predictable and our map of reality is really real, and that's what it is. But what you're talking about, like deconstructing certain portions so that there can be a level playing field now for something else to come up and explain that in a more robust way.
Yeah, and so this is where discussion about souls would come in as well, right? Um,
That's a good example of something that would be like that, subject to that. And
ego, another one.
since you're mentioning this, I think this is a great time to um, introduce again this idea that I introduced before in the chat that I'd like to take back as well this word of red pill. In that what it does, you like that one, eh? In that what it
I'm
does,
not entirely sure how you're
you're
going
not
to
gonna leave
accomplish
the
this.
you're not gonna leave the chat
It,
now.
it, it,
I've scooped you back.
no, no,
It's completely loaded, but we need our own word for what that is or does.
I'm just curious. It's almost like to try to take over the term outright. What are you gonna do with it? You know, like it's like one of those things that I think that have I would say the terminology's reputation is so damaged.
Reputation.
It's
By
so
who?
damaged.
One boohoo little community on the internet? What about the Matrix?
But the problem is it isn't the size of that community. It's the ratio of signal to it's the noise ratio that they make. They're
Oh, I
loud.
know. Yeah, because well, it's a pretty big impact they made. But the other thing is, for when you associate yourself with that, then you're easily a target. Oh, you are some
So
kind of
no,
misogynist.
I'm
You're a
fully familiar
sexist.
with this because, for example, I have an Odin avatar, right? Like,
Right, it just happened to
eh,
you.
and it was like, well, what the hell? It's Odinism. Yeah, no, it has nothing to do with it. But yeah, I'm already familiar with stepping on those toes, is what I'm saying.
Odinism, that's not even the worst of it. Um,
There's a true Odinism.
don't forget, you're now an Aryan groomer.
I don't even know what the hell
A
that is.
crypto Aryan groomer.
Yeah,
Because Odin picture.
yeah, I guess.
Yep,
Like literally, the only thing I can think
that's
of that
exactly
was
how it worked. Because you projected that image of Odin on your avatar.
I've had it since forever.
That was associated with Odinism, as if you're an Odinist, which was further associated with many Odinists are Aryan supremacy or whatever.
Yeah. This little Jew's got it all figured out.
Anyways, that's how it worked.
Ah.
Good times.
Jew being me. Just so we're clear what I'm talking about. I'm referring to
When you say
myself.
this, of course, yeah.
Well, no, I
Mm-hmm,
speak Hebrew
mm-hmm.
now. The whole deal.
Yeah, I know. It's just, yeah, that's amazing. Being a white male, though, I can't escape any of that. Anything, nothing. I have no escape. I'm just target number one.
It's, yeah, yeah. We're
I mean, yeah,
are we victims right now? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, 100%. I'm the only victim.
Oh right, yes, yes.
Look anywhere.
Anyway, as fun as the subject is, I'd like to get off of it. It's kind of annoying to have to
Yep.
have to deal with such bullshit.
Saying the wrong thing.
I didn't even say
Using
it.
sound bites. No, there's nothing he said. I know. It's just another example of the cognitive discrepancy window laying havoc against our poor civilization.
Is our poor civilization you and me?
Yep.
Okay.
Indeed, indeed.
One moment, please.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a break too. Be right back. And we're back. Or at least I'm back. Not sure yet. So I think it's almost time to get down to business. About the deck program. That's a pretty big one. So as I said before last week, I went through this spread of cards, kind of tried to lay out this idea of a virtual reality overlay. And like how you would use that to organize and structure, I guess, the like protocols and various other information that one would use to communicate within the context of the guild. So that's the scope of it, and organizing within the guild. And this involves top to bottom, like every single chart and everything that we've done up to this point. Or it should anyways. What I would start with only gets us so far, and then it would have to kind of just spread out from there. But of course we've already established so much, even the last within the last 5 or 6 live streams, there's been a lot of usually, like, many of them we ended with just even a trying a game, like, to see what happens. So those ended up usually with like a number of cards that represented certain things, and not quite concrete examples, I guess. But we did get pretty far. I see you back at your chair there, Zhenya. You comfy?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if we are gonna continue on with the mythological stuff.
Yeah, we could, one or the other. I mean, I always like to avoid sprinting on the deck program. You know me. I'm just kidding. No, like, what were you thinking about myth?
Well,
Myth and magic. Like, we started off the live stream with, and we got into magic a bit and what that is. So how do we tie myth
Yeah.
into that? Yeah, let's do it, man.
well, the whole point of the myth part is sort of like to create an overlay above where things are happening to give meaning to why those things are happening.
Right. The why.
And so that's where myth fits in, and the terminology right now that we have, what we're trying to do is to sort of take those familiar terms that people use and to reestablish the myth as a mythology that is in parallel and in sync with the entire stacking and all that kind of jazz. Sorry to do this again.
It's fine.
In 2 seconds, I'll be right back.
Yeah. So I just figured I'd set up our tabletop here. Dreams, myth, and magic. That was kind of an initial idea, anyways, of what we could get into. Of course, on the other side, I guess you could say my usual preference towards deck program contextualization and development. Took a good chunk of this live stream, in which I again appreciate the even opportunity, I guess, to monologue as part of this series, because I often feel like it's just a typical pragmatic academic fight, I guess you could say. Like, I always want to get something done, and Jenya always wants to, okay, well, here are the fundamentals before you can do that, and communication has to happen. Now, according to model, that's not to say that there's always another side to the coin, as in, like, well, the academic is typically flying in the sky and has nothing to apply it to, or doesn't know where to begin, right? So this is kind of like the kind of development relationship. Yeah, no, I mean. Mm-hmm.
No, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, good.
But
Cool.
it's okay. All right, I have
Yeah.
returned. You were asking me about myth and why it's
Yeah, do you have the live stream up on your computer? You're
it's muted.
muted, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, you can see it though, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah, I just wrote down on a paper dreams, myth, and magic.
Oh yeah, I see that.
It's in the center.
So. Apologies. Yeah. So part of this is this sort of like a reclamation of a few key terms. Some of them are more on the esoteric side. Others are more down to earth, so to speak. But
Right.
but I would say misused. A great example is like the self.
So as usual, yep, we have our collision, our namespace collisions happening.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that always happens. You have, everybody has their own terms for stuff. Get it out. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's very expected to have namespace collisions. This is
Yeah,
a
and-
consequence of realizing that there are other people exist.
So this is where from domains the idea of context comes into play, right? From domain-driven design, where we isolate the namespace of certain terms and say, okay, it means this under this namespace.
Right,
it means
domain-driven
that
design,
under-
yeah, correct.
It means something else under a different namespace.
That's what
Which
I like
is,
about it. It's pragmatic.
Which is, yeah. So under our namespace, these words start to have take on.
And it's kind of arbitrary. When you say a domain, you're just kind of like shuffling a bunch of things towards, for temporarily,
Yeah,
categorical reasons.
under this label.
Mhm.
We'll list
That's what
out
we
this
have to do here in
prospect.
the card game as well. We find ourselves always having to compromise like that, because there is no like black and white, right? Cheers.
That's what I wanted to hear.
That's some apple juice.
Nope. Much better.
Oh, good.
It looks like it's in a cup for apple juice. That's for sure. Yeah. So yeah, the primary goal here is to sort of assert a few words that are part of the systemic mythology, or the running out, whichever one it happens to be. There's a few of them, obviously, to choose from. Anything from religion to scientism, to the scientists make stuff. So there's quite a broad spectrum to actually to take from, and fortunately, because they're all trying to address ontology, and because they're making the same mistake of being atomic, right? we have a sort of like a great incidentally a great landscape of conversions to actually isolate from, and so this is where like all of these quote unquote mythological archetypes are coming from. um uh, we haven't really established that outside of me rambling about this, so that's kind of where I've been wanting to ask for feedback if they make sense. But yeah, so you're writing them down there.
Just
um
trigger words. A few trigger words: self, religion, soul, scientist.
I would flip them.
They're not in any
No,
whatsoever
no, I
order
know,
other
but like
than what I
as
heard.
they are written right now, you should probably look at them and like, whoa, they're crisscrossed in there.
Mm. Okay, fine. Yeah, but and this would be getting into the actual
Don't touch the mouse.
domain,
Don't
the
touch the
domain
mouse.
itself.
Yeah. So this is if you're starting to actually trying to assert what you're trying to, but within our domain, we have both self and soul and source and like, and they mean very very specific things that you can actually use all of these words to weave together a clear picture. And
Hmm.
finger off, finger off. Shows. Anyway, yeah. So and source and what ego.
Hmm.
We have
So
like a
this
lot
is
of
within
these.
the domain. So you're just kind of like buckshot a bunch of words out there, and okay, now
Yeah.
let's relate them. Let's figure out what the grammar is between, or like the.
Scientist and religion wouldn't be part of that buckshot, by the way. So just
Oh no,
leave
I'm
it.
talking about describing any domain, like any domain that you're gonna communicate to another
Mhm.
person. You're just your namespace, right? Your
Yeah,
namespace is within the domain.
right.
So you've got to define terms. That's where you start, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we have. Do you want me to define them right now? Because look, I mean, we can define them, or we can assume the definitions we already know about, and then just kind of discuss them, which
Yeah,
is what I was thinking.
exactly. Correct. Yep.
Okay, so self is like, well, I guess we're going to go through the definitions if we're going to talk about them
Now
because,
wait. So what I just want to know before is, so we are talking about magic. the
right?
main part of that was like, um, you're having a model inside of your head, and you're hyperstitiously projecting that out onto reality. And through time, the object grows, or whatever, things change how you want, right? Kind of.
That's like a very deep sort of dive, yeah.
Right. And so there's the other point of that is that, oh, this is just what everyone does all the time, and everything is magic.
Yeah, like that's what it ends up being, right? Like it's a completely nonchalant, a completely ordinary part of
Right.
experience. It has nothing to
Okay.
do with what we perceive the word to actually to mean in common speech. But yeah,
Right. And so we wanted to get towards myth, I think.
so myth would be like magic has to do with agents doing stuff, right?
Hmm.
Within a space. So that space, the description of this space would be the
Right. And the myth, or like, in other words, the like the role and identity of the actor or the agent.
yeah, that's what does the prescription of that.
Yeah.
So that's the ongoing. That's the whys, the who's and the. That's where all the who's, all the whys belong to. And if you'll notice, it's on a layer that's actually kind of impersonal. All the who's, and all the whys are not
So
personal.
I was just thinking back to the OSI model, and like, if you could actually consider protocol sets as myth, that control packet encapsulation and
A
transmission.
protocol would be a reification, right? Because a protocol operates on a layer below where the meaning exists. So it's the protocol is what operates
Right,
in the
right.
fundamental layer.
But I mean, like, just the idea of trying to associate a myth with how that works. Like in our textbooks, then we say, oh, this is what happens. The packet gets encapsulated, and
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
is
That
the
is a myth.
this is the data agent. The data agent takes a packet from the network agent, or whatever, you know.
Yeah. So that's like the context. That's the entire world, if you
So
will.
this is the myth stack.
Yeah. So, but note something about this one, this particular myth. While it's describable and you can picture it and all of those types of things, and the symbols will work together, when you try to like say relate it to the body now, there's I this particular one is actually a bad example because it does relate to the body, but um,
Which particular myth are you talking about?
so you the OSI model.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that, of course that would relate to the body a bit more, since we even used it. But
Right. Yeah. So we want to talk about embodied myth, and that
yeah,
we're actually
so
talking about experience and what people are doing, and not necessarily okay. There may be a myth of this layer and that layer, but it's only so as far as behavior needs to be adjusted by people doing things.
so like the myth of progress, or like no, you need to buy a car to look cool, right? Like that sort of mythology. That's a more disembodied myth that has purpose, has reifications, right? But it's going through all of the currencies, this uh, uh, how
Hmm.
currency uproots a bunch of the processes, and reifies them to the different end altogether.
I'm trying to
All
imagine like some like god of encapsulation or something, like that just
of what?
hands data from one area to another. Like I don't know.
Well, that's coding and encoding.
Just like a mythic understanding of the why of the stack. You know, like there's a data god that loves data and wants to just take it from where it should go here and there.
Well, that's I'm tempted to say that's Grandmaster, but Grandmaster is more about the insight into it, and but it is also that in and of itself. It's not
Hmm.
like apart from it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
But the problem there is again is if you try to unify it as a selfhood, you'll have a problem.
Right. If you're gonna reify your archetypes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway, it's that whole emptiness. It's Grandmasters like the Buddha nature discussion. What you're talking about is about the emptiness discussion, I guess.
We don't have to go there.
No, 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 no. Sorry, that's what I'm actually struggling with. Never mind. It's easier to personify it, that's for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting thought. How to mythify, or that, like, no matter what we're doing, the myth layer is sort of there, right?
Well,
Like, the myth of progress, like you were saying, like the myth of this and that. It kind of like forms this context of our reality of what exists.
uh that's the discussion of how symbols have to co-arise alongside the protocols, right? Like they don't arise on their own as useless units that do nothing anyway.
Symbols alongside protocol. Did you
Right.
say?
So the symbol would be the actual marking
Yeah, yeah, I know what you
for
mean.
uh,
Um,
the variation,
this is
whereas the
the
protocol.
interface in JavaScript, where you've got like the interface or like TypeScript. That separation between protocol and like when what's emergent, coalescently emergent, as like
Sure. Yes, this is a
as
tougher
like a
example.
label, something
That's a
like that.
tougher example to actually talk about,
Fine.
in layman's terms. But yeah, you're right. It is that. Um, so we have basically the symbol itself and the way they are patterned, right? So the symbol is something in space. The pattern is how these changes appear through time, how these variations
Right.
morph in a sequence. So what defines a pattern uh, that recognizes expressions, right, within the patterns.
So this is a
What is
linkage.
what is an expression, what isn't an expression? That's the protocol, right?
Mhm.
So you need to have that expression, and that expression next becomes the next layer of carrier. And so you use these expressions
Right,
as
and you're
as the next
talking
layer.
about the valid, so grammar and syntax, valid syntax structure,
Yeah,
in order to go up to the next layer.
right. So now think about it this way. Um, where would you ever see symbols arise without anything patterning them together? Right? Like you don't have this phenomena
Yeah,
happening.
never do or would. It always means
So
something if somebody made
exactly,
something.
there's already something at the next layer to sort of already attach meaning to it. The examples of convergent evolution is one such example, right? Like there's a space for that behavior which looks like this body shape. So no matter where you're coming from, that's what you converge on, right? Like
Hmm.
there's those always like a snapping point to which it's like the same as quantum mechanics, where you have snapping points for where the electron can go.
Mm-hmm.
Analogy wise, like there's only like so many spheres it can like literally occupy, and it has to go there. And there's just something about that energy spot that's the lowest in its local minimum. It's the local minima, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. So that's why there's a
It's
convergence
interesting how the symbol can be embedded in the expression as well, and like how intentionally you can repeat
you're cutting
like
out.
a slogan. Oh yeah, probably for you.
Okay.
But anyways, I was just saying like
You cut out a couple cuts.
it's interesting how you can have symbols that you can intentionally repeat that symbol and it comes up through the expression, like the linked expression. Like
Yeah,
just advertising, marketing,
you're
brand,
cutting out again.
brand. Yeah. Sorry, I'll just stop moving.
Yeah.
Is it better? Like exploiting this through brand, like corporate brand
So those
identity.
are not those aren't those are full memplexes, right? So artifacts, they don't give us a symbol as much as they give us an entire package in an expression, which we take as a symbol, but because of the lower layers. Can you hear me?
Right. Yeah. No, I can hear you fine. Yeah, you've never cut out for me.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, so like on our layer, it looks like a symbol, right? But because of the way the stacking works, right, it breaks down into an
Hmm.
entire expression, lower and lower and
But
lower.
okay,
And
this is
given our
always
neuralness,
the
we have a bunch of
nexus.
layers going
The
on.
nexus model tells us or shows that this happens
Hmm.
at every single layer. You're always having symbol shunting or not shunting, but whatever, you know, this that's probably it.
Damn it, you're cutting out again. So the
Yeah.
next model, something, something. That's probably it.
Well, you
That's
know, the
what she said.
nexus model set and has this built into it, this symbolic stacking,
Yeah.
right? Like just the fact of the nexus, right? You have at each layer, at each carrier, you have a new set of a new grammar, new types of things, types of objects, right?
Yeah.
Each one is recognized as a symbol, right, at some level, right?
Mhm.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like to connect in that? Like this is probably something uh, I don't know if you call it symbol shunting, is something that's recurrent throughout the stack, the carrier stack. You're seeing it
Yeah.
at every layer.
Well, a symbol, the proto, okay. So symbol shunting is what happens when a protocol, the protocol takes in signals from one membrane, from one sort of carrier through the membrane, right? And outputs a different set of signals on other carriers, potentially the same one, but for the sake of simplicity, you got to imagine another carrier on the opposite end of the membrane coming out, different, right? Like, so if a pattern comes in, a pattern comes out, right? Codependent. So this, so so the middle portion here is the symbol shunter, right? It uses internal rules. That's the protocol to take to do something with this symbol to transform into that
Mm-hmm.
symbol. So that's basically what you get with a program, right? Symbol shunting is what you get in the program. So uh, to take it all the way
Right.
back to where
Yeah, your inputs and
it's
outputs have to match
really relevant
through
to
fiat.
us, it's this strange loop, and the strange loop, mm, sort of like it depends on the protocol, right?
Mm-hmm.
Protocol dictate what matches what. Um, and
We must
as
be
you
pretty
know, it could
lagged.
be a Turing complete. Um, yeah, there's like Netflix and another movie going on with my son, so
It's all good.
yeah, it's a little bit. I
Not it.
will turn off my video. How's this?
Well, it's fine now, as long as you can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I'll just hold still.
So yeah, yeah, you've been holding still in that interesting position for a while.
Yeah, I saw your picture. Thanks.
Um, you're welcome.
Your
Uh,
camera is viewing from below. You're looking up my nose though from the laptop. The live stream doesn't have that view.
yeah, I know, I know, I can see it. So where were we? We were talking about
Stacking, carrier stacking through
the
symbol
core
shunting,
horizon essentially.
and myth at each layer
Yeah.
of the stack. And,
So
mhm.
okay, so part of the problem we're encountering immediately is the form. It's like a formal system, so we're encountering the incompleteness stuff.
Right.
And the second aspect of it is the yes, like you were saying, stacking up the layers of significance and doing it that way. And so, what does that all amount to? Is that yeah, like entire meme plexes are embedded into a tiny little artifact of like a couple letters, you know,
Right.
like the word magic, for example, or the word breath, or the word
Yeah.
dream or myth, like all ego. All of these things are big meme plexes. Um, soul source. That's that, and Mimplex,
Wrapped
right,
up
is the
into a
architect.
symbol or into a what did you say? Entire
It's
meme
like an
plex is
artifact.
into
I'm
an
not,
artifact, right? Which
yeah,
through which you get triggered.
yeah.
Of
So
course,
this is
into an
where
artifact. Yeah.
breath is like is used for the thing, and it's all an archetype, right? Because it's a Mimplex, and the Mimplex has the two shapes. The archetype uh, still comes from that line of thinking. So yeah, that's how it all fits together. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Oh, can't
Uh,
hear you.
for sure. Yeah, I think I'm lagged too. Like once I start talking, it's like 3 seconds later, or 4 seconds later, you realize I'm talking.
Mm,
It's like pretty lagged, which sucks.
okay.
But anyways, yeah, this is a really cool topic. Um, so, and how are we bringing this back to myth? It's
So
like we got carrier
they're all a
stack.
part of
Yep.
myths. So what ego and self and soul and source, all of these things are part of your like big narrative, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
not part of the mechanics of the internal stuff. They're more about what you would be talking about, to whom you'd be talking to, about what. So they're part of the actual mythology that the story being built to weave everything together into one giant social protocol, right? Which systemically obfuscated, and by model with model is
Right.
the
And
way
this is
I'm
kind of
thinking.
what you mean by memeplex, is a giant collection of understanding, I guess, of say a certain
Yeah, like
domain.
ego requires an entire definition. Yeah, ego being like
Hmm.
this mirror image of the system embedded into a specific neural unit, if you will,
Hmm.
or a neural unit complex.
So these memeplexes, I'd like to think them like in kind of wrapped up, sort of, I guess, into the artifact, like you said, but a domain of behavior, or like, you know, you'd like to section them off, but they ultimately do all kind of coalesce and
Yeah,
interface with this overarching type of myth, like the myth, I guess, right? That's
right.
the world in which they exist.
So, given the current obfuscated system, right, all of these words don't really correlate to each other.
There's no way to verify it for yourself that if there is any uh, correlation.
All right.
It's a
Given
fiat by
the other
fiat.
perspective, they're all correlated for very specific ways.
Typically, yeah. Now, anybody can interpret these set of words in a different way through different domain, right?
Hmm. Yes.
We're, I guess, talking about the, well,
It's-
contemporary New Age, all whatever.
Yeah, so the argument I guess would be is that those domains obfuscate all the meaning, whereas this domain actually um, gives you the
Right.
isomorphic sort of
Through a
description.
Portal Mountain lens, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, always the idea.
Correct.
So yeah, that's that. We can go into each individual one. That self, I think we've described before, having to do with conceit and self-reference. It's a very basic underlying assignment
Right.
um, to a spectacular object of experience, uh, which is more of a categorical nature. Um, so you already have to have a kind of a discrepancy with categorical thinking to begin with to start applying this self-order atomically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, by that I mean like you can divide the categories of this is myself, this is not myself. It's a very abstract notion. So
Right.
it's like it's kind of like as soon as beautiful.
This
As
is
soon
the
as
archetype of civilization, I think.
yeah,
We've talked
so
about it, the
soon as
commodification. Yeah.
categorical thinking exists,
Plateaus, sorry.
yeah, as soon
Go
as the
ahead.
categorical thinking type of stuff makes it into the narrative, the conceited element of self-reference identification uh, takes on a role within the narrative, right? As an object, a projected object from
Mm-hmm.
being essentially
This is the
on
second
the
arrow.
dashboard. Yeah, so now you have a self-abstraction. So that's kind of what that is. The ego is another one that's sort of immediate. It's a little different in that it's actually not it's the hijacking of this selfhood into the structure, I guess, call it, of the system. So sort of like embedding the system into the self image, right? You get an ego. Um, so that's what that is. The market machine system specifically.
Hmm.
So that to
Wait, so
so
you
that
just
is the
linked from this
the
affect,
commodification.
the affect chart and conceitedness. You link that in, so this as a major lever of control, if you will, of this establishment of an ego type of complex.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, because you need that selfhood established to
This
begin with.
this being like the input
Atomized.
interface, like the levers of control, if you will, is the carrot and the stick of society, which can be used to
Yeah.
control an individual.
Yes.
Mhm.
Sure. Yeah. That, that's bluntly, to put it bluntly.
Right. That's a major underpinning.
Yes, but like mhm, mhm. So, just to carry over the chain of how this is all interlinked, we have, by the way, in the feed, the diagram, since you've moved
Is
it,
it an old
looks
one?
very blurry.
Yeah, I bet. I tried. That's why I laughed. I was laughing when you were talking. Sorry. Just because I tried zooming on it, but it's so bad. So what I actually need to do is put it up a different way. But carry on.
That's fine.
Don't mind me. We've already moved on from
Yeah.
this chart.
All right. So selfhood comes from the categorization, which comes from count, like the problem of counting. We've made that link before, I believe. If we need to go into detail, we will, if it's requested, I guess. But the point is really that you establish the selfhood, which now is separate from others, right? So that's the ground carrier now for ego, which establishes that it
Mm-hmm.
needs to be a cog in the machine somehow. So which cog is it? Ego is like this, the machine determining is the thing that commodifies the rest of the your own stack into products to sell to this market that it imagines
Mm-hmm.
in its APS, and starts trading up and down with different with the shelter with sorry, not shelter, with organism, with the environment, with the bits and pieces of its cognitive capacity, from its maintenance, sorry, from its neural OS, for example, being a human calculator like I am,
Mm-hmm.
um, and all the way up to the social stuff, which is like where politics and the rest of the spectacle is basically found, with scientism effectively being the the full commodification of the neural OS, uh, which was the Industrial Revolution part, where and now the information revolution is commodified the social aspect with the social media. You know what I'm talking about,
Mm.
right? With
Oh,
the
oh yeah.
information age.
Yeah.
I kind of ran through a lot of links there, but it was about the point there I'm trying to go for is because those are the commodification plateaus. So things are built upon what is available in those layers, and with the market, that's what it trades up to, and it's using the ego to do all of this with. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
So it's like a
so you
central linchpin or whatever you call it, like a central
it would be
fulcrum
like
point.
what you'd call the implant, right? It would be like all of that kind of analogy. This is like the implant from like the SOT score kind of,
If you will,
or
yeah.
whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is that concept. And what do we have from there? We have soul. Soul is basically the effect that all of this process is causing to the neural unit, or the neural unit nexus as a whole. Um, like all of the effects that it causes, because it's a characteristic situation with pleasure and pain being
Mm-hmm.
being the reward punishment system, right? There's an overabundance of two things: fear and anxiety, and all of that kind of
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
And uh, and when that's not there, when you finally get a relief from all of that, there's this like manic sort of like uh, uh, injection of drug-induced sort of like pleasure, that we latch on to, and fear again in anxiety of losing that at any moment,
Yeah.
due to the flow of
No
things.
doubt. Yeah. So
So
that's
so
a way
there's
that
this
pleasure
two.
can feel like pain actually, is in anticipation or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Hmm. Hmm. So So that's kind of like the perpetual circumstance that ego bestows upon the whole thing through the self, right? Through all of these false identifications, and and because it's only concerned in trading in these commodities as in a form of as a form of compensation for what is actually being fed back to it, right? So there's like a negative space of dread and a collect like
Mm-hmm.
if you were to use an analogy like a bucket gets filled and filled and filled, that has the twofold feeling of emptiness, like being vacant inside, being unfulfilled, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
and that comes from the neglect of the concerns themselves,
Right.
the
Natural
areas of
concerns.
concern, the natural
Mm-hmm.
concerns, all of that jazz. Simply because the ego isn't trading in that, it's commodifying. It's trading in currencies. It doesn't really
Right.
see
Yeah. So yeah,
qualities. It sees
that's the
quantities.
fundamental hollowness of it is that you're ultimately not being satisfied per your
Right. So
needs
that's missing.
through the institute, as we call it.
Coupled with almost like an insane built up rage due to the constant barrage of punishment for stepping the wrong way, for looking the wrong way, for shitting the wrong way, like you name it the wrong way. And on and on and on and on and on it goes in terms of everybody being up in your business
Mm-hmm.
uh, from the perspective of again that very same ego. So if it's not somebody doing it to you, you're doing it to
Right.
yourself instead.
Yeah.
So either
And
way, you're not free from it.
And like we got into certain topics earlier before, and you're like, okay, let's not talk about this anymore. And it's like, you know that when you're putting out certain artifacts, it's like it comes with these gigantic memeplexes of which are just not even your responsibility, quote unquote, but you have to be aware.
Mhm.
And all this is like the social OS implications of it, right? Like,
Mhm.
yeah, how things.
Which will tie
Yeah.
back into whatever myth is being used. And if the wrong myth is being used, then the
Mm-hmm.
implications are wrong, and you find yourself in like I found myself being again like asked to be
Yeah.
let go from such
So,
for some reason that
so we're sorry, Jania. We have to let you go.
right
You
like
are just
geez.
unacceptable. Sorry, the corporate
Yeah.
words come down from corporate.
Hmm.
If you could just go
So
ahead and move your
I
stapler
think
downstairs.
I th- I think the only other one that's left to actually cover, and don't think I did a very good job of it ever before, is source. And source would be effectively in this scenario the mirror image to uh to sorry.
Like the body, basically, like
So
chaos, or
ego is the
no?
market, so
Right.
soul and source, actually, soul and source. Source being like the origin of where all of this dread and emptiness, this thing that feels those things comes from, right? So it's another misattribution, because
That's weird. I
the
don't know.
market is because the market machine is the unseen, right?
There's so many
It's like the unseen of
definitions too, right?
obfuscated
Like,
myth.
and we've all only had our own experiences of in what context people have used these particular terms, right? So that's
Oh,
another
there's a reason I
difficulty.
picked those specific ones. When you say source, people think absolutes. People think like God or any of those things. So
Right.
what people tend to see for it is effectively the wrong. I'm not. That's not everybody, obviously. Like it's on an individual basis, and it's a tall order for me to claim what people see. But for the purposes of our discussion, this particular word refers to the effect that you can observe in people when they're trying to assign assign the causal factor of
Right.
their existential uh, existential sort of
Mm-hmm. So causal
reality,
within
if
space-time,
you
some
will.
type of space-time phenomenon that's occurred.
Yeah, yeah. So the choice is not to see, but the dread is because the dread itself is fed in by a mechanical system outside the market machine, which is obfuscated behind uh, 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 an incoherent narrative, right? The whole thing is lumped together as a as like this one giant mystery, and it's called the
Mm-hmm.
source of my existence, if you will, which is only identified through this painful interaction. So the reason it's a mistake and whatnot is because first of all, there shouldn't be a painful interaction to begin with, and that's kind of where we are
And
coming
what's the
with
painful
the
part?
whole idea for the
Discussing or
21,
talking?
right?
Talking about it?
That's what so remember how I was building up from the self to the soul to the ego to the soul and now to the source. So the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing is a stack of giant reward punishment anxiety, right? So the
In
source is
subtler
sort
and
of like a
subtler fashion.
yeah. Yeah, so the source becomes this sort of like explanation for the obfuscation for why there's this
For why
unseen.
I don't see the stack below me and I am
Yeah,
not its
yeah,
king.
or worse, why there is no stack below me, right? If you want to take it that far.
Damn. Yeah, right. Well, you would never ask that question though, but that's the question.
Hmm. So this is sort of what the source is. It's sort of the misattribution.
Right.
Um, in a lot of cases,
So
this
it's
is
one of those
this is
myths that explains your universe and your world that actually shortcuts off. Uh,
yeah,
uh,
the actual causal
yeah.
um, the actual causal factors that are involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, this is a sort of like a
So
character, an
we've
archetype within the
yeah we've gone
mythos,
through it.
a
It's
source, shortcut
like
for the
a
word.
this is like so this is the definitions of how things are misapprehended or whatever. Um, so we also need to talk about isomorphic myth.
So yeah, so because of the way I've just described them as we went through them, right? You can actually see where they show up in the model, what they
Mm-hmm.
actually are, and how they're just ephemeral elements of a completely impersonal process that has no real bearing on what you need to identify with. It's because it's sort of an alien virtual landscape that is
Mm.
uh, disembodied from any kind of like proper reification.
Yeah,
It potentially.
that's
On
the
the flip
ultimate
side,
red
this is
pill.
exactly yeah. On the flip side, this is exactly the space you need to work from to reify
Mm-hmm.
properly.
Right. Like we were
Red
just talking
pill.
about
I'd like
deconstructing
to
things
see
and then
here.
to
Okay,
make the
I'll
space.
explain to you my little triggering trigger for
Okay, you
red
want to
pill
get
because
into
I've
that
already
part?
sort of used it for another. You know how I'm using objectivism as like a measurement stick for stupidity.
Fine.
Like so, the objectivist is the underlying myth. So scientism is like one of a what do you call it? One of its denominations,
Right.
right?
Yeah. No, I agree.
Scientism is the market in the technical sense. There's marketing it's in a magical sense. Um, so red pill is this market in its what do you call it? In the sex in the sexual gratification.
Oh,
Um,
the what do you call
space.
that?
So it's already like a mythology that works in
And
a like
that's an even more
this
broader one
abstract
of the
part of the mythospace of the market
they
machine
call it
itself.
the pickup artist community.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So like that's what Red Pill is like that mythology space for that to me, which is why I get a little bit cringed if to start adopting it.
Well, as we were
You know,
talking, yeah, do you get associated with
it's a
that?
personal thing.
Even though, like, so how could you take something so amazing as the idea from the Matrix? If you take a red pill and it's like a choice, okay, now I'm gonna understand what the fuck you guys are talking about. I'm just gonna swallow the pill. It'd be really easy. Pardon my mouth if I swore too much.
I
But think about
You know
how
what? I
how
think that's
how
actually a detrimental way to look at it because it's again it places the onus, right, on something that
as
is
a
out
product,
there, something that's more abstract, some
right?
pill
Yeah.
to
Okay.
take in,
Yeah.
some book
Yep.
to read,
I know. But this is the culture.
where
It
the
is
choice
culturally
is the
understood.
choice.
So we need to do
And
name
it's not
space
really a
development.
choice either; it's a realization.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no. Yeah. It's a realization, not a choice. So it's not like you just take a pill. It's a bad metaphor. So what is our word for the meme used to deconstruct something? Because when somebody has an idea that's really like dumb, but let's say okay, and then you just give them the packet of information that destroys that idea, right? So there can be space made, for something else to flower in its space, a much better idea. Who knows, right? Um, right, in culture we see these ideas, the people being very ignorant and stubborn in their worldview and or whatever, and certain things are just ripe for the picking as far as hitting it with a meme, right, and something destroying. So, and that's what we're talking about in a way, a bit, is deconstructing things so that they can be constructed up more healthy, right? And so some things are actually the deserved target of such mimetic campaigns, right? So what do we call that? What's the word?
Um,
If not a red pill, what is the
you know
name
what?
for the incoming packet of
So,
information
so
that's
you
going to
know what comes
destroy
to
your
mind as you're
paradigm?
talking about this?
What?
You know what comes to mind as you're talking about this?
What does?
The episode where Bender is like sent off into space.
It's been a while.
What's happening?
Sent off into space. I don't remember
Yeah,
that
yeah.
particular episode.
Do you remember he encounters a big ass cloud in space?
Oh yeah, yeah.
When you
The
do something
thing.
right.
It's like they never did anything at all. Is what was it?
Yeah, that's the main message.
Oh man.
That's the problem I have with things like red pill or questions like did you attain like first yana?
Correct.
Did you attain like second yana?
Correct.
Like even if I say something, like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
This
Like
is
that's
very
like
typical, and even what we, or you, I guess, in your last kind of SOTS thing, were giving a bunch of Buddhist type scriptures and explanations, and one of them was that Buddha, do I have an identity, or what was it about? But it's like, does the
It's
self
one of the
exist? Yeah, right. Does it or doesn't it? No matter what you say, if you say something as the Buddha, it's going to be a problem. If you don't say anything, or it'll be a problem, or whatever. But just there's nothing you can do sometimes.
What do you want to watch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you kill him on the road, man.
So this is just another example of certain protocols. And
Yeah. So the only thing I can think of to add to the mythological stuff is that we have man and woman, which I went into a couple of times now.
we got into it a bit. Yep. I remember reading on the word cloud.
Yeah. So there's that got
reviewing the
interesting.
last couple of live streams there. Yeah. Definitely got into the myth, gender, all that.
So they play a role, birth and death. Death is already an archetype within the primordial stack. Birth being a mythological one.
Mythal as a concept. Or what do you mean, birth?
Yeah, so as a concept of birth would be like the coming into existence of an addressable agent,
Right. I was
whereas
born.
death would be defined by whereas death is defined by the inability to further address the agent in question.
Right. Yes, that's how we define it. That's how I define my own death too. We can't address the agent anymore. WTF. Anyways.
Yeah. Life, the other primordial archetype, could be ascribed to the entire stacking growth phenomena itself. So it's like the fauna grows or the flora, rather. It's like thinking of it like as a flora and fauna stacks,
Do they
growing and
stack?
growing and growing.
I don't know how they
Well,
stack. It's a
I'm just
bad
talking
metaphor
about life.
because
I'm just
not
talking about
everybody
grow.
is in the gardening guild.
Well, no, but of course they stack. You got molecules, you've got cells, you've got
Oh,
organs.
like
Stacking. There's stacking going on everywhere.
you're
So the
talking about
group,
plants, though. Okay.
plants growth, but
I didn't know if they
animals can do their
flora
own
and
stacks
fauna
too, so.
stack in a special way. Flora and fauna. If they stack in a special way, I didn't know that. Just an example
The
of
point
life.
is
The
that their
stack.
grammatical capacity stacks
Gotcha. Yeah. Into their own
with
domains.
complex agency.
Mm-hmm. Just
Um,
like that.
and, yeah, so life as a whole. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. No, you've never cut out from talking
I'm cutting it. I'm cutting it.
on
now,
my
so I
end.
don't know.
Although maybe you can't hear me too well, which has happened a lot, but I can hear you just fine. It's been delayed like
Yeah, I
3
can hear you now.
seconds, 3-4
Okay.
seconds.
So yeah, it's just the complexities of the stacks and all of that jazz. So that's kind of like what the whole archetype of life is. But birth and death are also related, with death still being um, reliant on life from the previous definitions, but also now having a more connected definition to
Yeah, this is really cool.
mythological. So, but birth just belongs to mythology because there's no differentiation in the life element. It's all just one giant concoction of entropy, of energy dissipation.
Hmm.
From the perspective of mythology, death happens to somebody who was addressable and therefore participated in identity role mechanics in the narrative,
Right.
and so on and so forth.
That's interesting as a top-down thing. Like
So
we're
that's
joking about the state having this idea, like, okay, you're not addressable anymore, and like, and that's as if that's the perspective of dying, of death. But no individual experiences death. Like, oh wow, gee, I can't address that person anymore.
yeah, you can't say that to yourself.
So yeah, it's different.
Yeah, that's something
Anyways.
I've mentioned a few times.
Yeah, so I just want
Nobody
we're at the
actually says that.
3 hour mark. Sorry, and I know we're kind of lagged on the audio a bit. You cool for a break? Say 2-3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. So I'd rather I don't know. So it's 3:13
So
on the
we
stream.
covered
Hmm. We can probably wrap up
Okay.
some things and maybe do
cover-
another like part 2 hour. I don't know if you have time, but
Yeah, for now I do.
sweet.
So I just wanted to go like we covered a bit of myth, you covered magic. I only did something at the beginning. So the only thing left is really to go back on dreams, and that's something that's been a recurring avoidance subject.
A recurring dream that you've had?
a recurrent avoidant
Oh,
subject.
we brought
Nobody
this
wants to
up
talk about it
also.
too much.
Yeah, fine. We brought this up a couple streams ago, I think, when we, and then in discussion when we had woke AF. Remember our stack? What's the stack of Dream? We're
Yeah.
using that, right? Not that, but
No,
like, you
no,
know,
no.
like
I was
the
we're gonna.
top was Lucid,
Yes, yes.
and then what was
Yeah,
the
yeah.
stack?
So lucid. Lucid is the word I want to use.
Just
There's
give me the stack
lucid.
before we go on
And then
break.
there's
Because I forget.
I
Dream,
don't have
Dream.
it offhand.
There's Waking Dream is next.
Yeah, sleep and dream,
Waking
and then
dream.
and then dreamless sleep.
Dreamless Sleep.
Yeah, that's the gist.
What was so? Is that what it is though?
Mhm.
What was the third? Pragmatic. Lucid.
Third,
Waking Dream.
lucid.
I just don't want to go back into the chat, but
Sorry.
probably will.
Lucid, waking, dream.
I think so.
Sleeping dream.
Let's do it. I'm gonna do a search. Lucid did. No wait.
Yeah,
It would
sleeping
be
dream.
better to sleep. Corresponding to. Come on, somebody must have. Okay. Lucid, waking dream, dream, and then dreamless sleep.
Or
Just
dreaming
dream.
sleep or something.
No, well, that's off of the lobby. The lobby. Substituting woke AF and lucid.
Yeah.
Our term, which we just decided is too triggering. But it may help, you know, like that's part of our canon mythology, whatever. The Grandmaster is woke AF. So
Actually,
anyways, yeah, like wrap it up. I don't know if we're like delayed, but yeah, go ahead.
Lucidity can happen within a dream as well.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, that's, and as you would expect, lucidity can happen at any other part of it.
So what I'm saying is that the middle kind of merges a little bit, right? It doesn't matter whether you're in a waking dream or in a dream. You can become lucid at either point.
Right.
And you can lose the dream.
Yeah. Correct. Interesting. Yep. That's the metaphor.
So there's like a bunch of mechanics going on in there. So that's why I want to talk about this as a subject.
Now that
All right,
this actually, wow, yep, fits. It's like our spaghetti and meatballs. Good
Glad
times.
you remember that one.
All right, be right back.
Yeah, man.
Hey yo, back. So I was just thinking a little bit about
So
that.
I'm not too far away, but I'm not here yet.
Yeah, cool. About the lucid dreaming, or this, what do you call it? This triad. This triad, lucid, waking dream, dreamless sleep, is very good for bootstrapping, I think. I think it's a damn near perfect introductory triad. I don't know if that's why you thought about it. Just this, the lucid triad stack.
You know, the actual triad, if you will, isn't something I've thought of personally. It's something that clicked recently, but the actual origin
Mhm.
of it is from all places, and you'll laugh at me because I always pick up on it. It's like I do a Taoism.
Okay.
It's from the Upanishads.
Fine.
The Hinduism sort of Brahman, Atman.
Yep. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Where
Are you
it's
like
also
playing with
so-
your microphone right now? I can just hear like something crumpling up on your microphone. But anyways, it's cool. Yeah.
He's doing that in a moment.
It's better.
All right, done. So yeah,
Cool. Yeah, it's a great triad.
that actually comes from there. But the problem is that again, like it while it gives you the experiences, like it doesn't have anything meaningful to say about the nature and causality.
It's a metaphor. Like, I think everybody's had a lucid dream, and that's why it's useful to like state that, right? To use this as part of a triad. The metaphor of the idea that you've woken up in a dream and you realize you're dreaming, and that you control reality to a certain extent, or it's within your like you are a reality processing unit or whatever, however you want to say it.
And so with our system, we haven't actually done a whole bunch of things on sense spheres and all of that kind of stuff that
No.
Buddhism does.
We haven't, and I don't think we need to yet.
Well, I just want to use it to illustrate the point between being awake in a
Sense
sense, like
spheres.
in the case of like the contemporary understanding of being awake in people's sleep.
Right.
So if you were to imagine the six senses, the five being smell, touch, body, hearing,
Right.
and sight, with body
Yeah.
covering all the different
But
scientific senses.
there are more senses up into your cognition and perception and all that.
Yeah. So the sixth sense becomes the mind, which is another like sort of thing that gives you information rather than
Right.
you're in control of. So mind is more of a sense in that sense. And so if we are looking at that sixth sense picture, then the difference between being awake and being asleep is literally the fact that awake is all six are at work, whereas
Uh-huh.
asleep is just the mind at work.
True. Fine.
So all reduced to
And
one.
so you can kind of realize while you're dreaming, you can tell the difference between what your senses normally give you and what the mind is trying to shove you right now, shove itself,
Right.
trying
And
to give
so
itself.
a waking dream, for example, is when you have all the senses doing their thing, yes, but you're not paying attention to that. You are only paying attention to what gets filtered through the mind, and again, you're actually reducing all of your waking experiences to just the mind, and so you're asleep. You know what I mean? Like that's where we can draw these distinctions in in a mechanical sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So to look at the senses, you go look
So,
at all of
so
these
there's like a
different
basis in reality of the model,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so lucidity would be not doing that. realizing each sense to be each sense. And so a lucid dream mood, for example, where none of the other senses are functioning, would be realizing that this is the mind sense doing this,
Right.
right? Right. So it would be
That's the
self,
metaphorical equivalent.
yeah, it would be self-referential. In lucidity and in the
Right.
awakened
It has
sense,
to be. Yeah.
it would be towards all the other senses as well.
Hmm.
You understand that there's a difference between what is filtered through the mind sense and the actual sense that is feeding this information into those senses.
Yeah.
You see the distinction already,
Yeah. To see
and
the
that's the
distinction,
lucidity.
that's the meditation, and this is why it seems powerful because I think many people can understand that as a basis for a metaphor or analogy or even allegory, if you will.
The biggest basis for analogy and allegory is actually the concept of isomorphism, but that's that's through the mind sense almost.
Hmm.
But the mindset, but you can also, but the mindset is doing symbolic representation of all the other senses, and so therefore there's already
Right.
a mechanism of analogy going on. So you can just totally leverage both concepts to demonstrate the mechanical concept.
Correct. And everything from your experience comes out of images and patterns
And
come
so
up
this,
through your sense. Yeah.
and all of this, of course, is why it's all leading back to formal systems where it's all symbol shunting and rules for symbol shunting, because it's all about these representations and how do you manipulate these representations or these rules to take this symbol set and transform it to that symbol set to give it some sort of quote unquote contextual meaning in a bigger sense, which is where you get the grammar, which is where you get another layer, and
Right.
so on and so forth. And no matter where you're operating, if that's this is the key. No matter where you're operating, like your functional thoughts, your functional understandings, and all, are always
Yep.
below the layer, always below the layer, become a
Mm. Which is
fundamental
going to
layer to
emerge
the ones where
above.
meaning exists.
Yeah.
Where meaning is. So the meaning has to always be sort of in a hyperstitional sense
Right.
from the perspective of
Yep.
yourself.
You don't make the mistake of the cognitive alignment window.
Mhm. And this is where you get usually the usually this is where the mistake towards there's a higher purpose, there's a higher um, that feeling is intuitive and it's correct in a sense, but it's not. It's rituals, the rituals that it produces through the through the market system. Sorry, it has nothing to do with reifying that in any useful way. All the reifications of that correct intuition is going to the fucking garbage, the shitter. So
Mm-hmm.
like we flush them down the toilet like feces, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Is what my assessment of that is.
But we can do better.
Mhm. That's the hope. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed our lag got better. We're under like half a second now. It was like 3 or 4 seconds. Ridiculous. It's better though.
Okay. I'll be right back. Do a bit of a monologue if you don't mind.
Sure. All right, buddy. Oh, wait. Hey,
What?
bud. You still there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Days.
What?
Yeah. So since we're near the
Yeah.
limit
What?
of the live stream,
Yeah.
let's just cut it off right now, and we'll, take it up again later. Maybe for a part
Sure.
two.
So you're cutting the stream and everything?
Yeah. I'm just gonna,
You're gonna cut the stream and everything?
unless you're gonna be back like within
Okay.
5 minutes, then because we still got about half an hour left in the
Uh,
recording, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'll be back within like 5 minutes, and then if it's just a half an hour, then that's perfect.
Okay. Yeah, because I know we wanted to like kind of recap a little bit of some things and kind of tie things in and all this, and
Yeah.
yeah, we need to
You
kind of
go
tie
ahead
it
and
all.
lead that discussion, and I'll be back. I'll be
Yeah,
back
bud.
in about a minute or two. Okay.
All right, cool,
All right. Cheers.
good. Mm-hmm. So I think we might be able to tie this topic of dreams back in through myth as this kind of potentially deconstructive event, in that things happen in our dreams, which we've experienced and witnessed, can be used analogically or metaphorically to point, like, I think pretty directly to like at least a great neutral analogy to this holonic organization, the Triad Protocol, the neural OS layers, specifically the ones within the horizon of experience, I guess. The mimetic, abstract, concrete, and shared. I think like this gives a pretty great analogy to those four layers, just as a way of introducing. Hey, bud, I hear you on again.
Yeah. Sorry, I missed the analogy.
Oh, just talking about how it's a good analogy for. I mentioned a number of things on the neural OS layers, specifically the ones within the horizon of experience, being mimetic, concrete, abstract, or abstract, concrete, and shared. Right, and that's kind of the analogy. Like, this is the imprint that we keep seeing throughout, and which we started off the entire chat with. That you need to see this pattern.
Well, that's
and then,
interesting because it places lucidity on the narrative. It places the dream on the abstract, and it places like just
Right.
like a complete like dreamless experience of sleeping in a mimetic. So it's like yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
I like it.
It works. I mean,
Really
we,
nice.
we may shift, we may think about it more, but yeah, it's just another of the countless triads that just slot into through modeling of
Check it out.
models,
Check it out.
ISO with
I'm just
perception
looking at the
mechanics.
card right now.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm just looking at the card right now on the table. A lucid, water, wake and dream, and dream. Like, if you take those under a window and pretend that this is the cognitive window discrepancy,
Right.
right there.
So the dream
like
is the reality.
the dream becomes like the last layer you're actually drawing from,
Hmm.
right? In
You
terms
can't
of
see any
your
deeper. That, in other words, it's a rigid. There is no shift in
And-
potential yet.
and to top it off, no, it doesn't give you any kind of clue that you should look deeper anyway. It's like you're sort of trapped in that sphere, a sphere of reality, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Huh.
All motivated towards that.
So this is actually a better view, exposition for the cognitive discrepancy window. Despite it, the other one is perfect too. Like, I mean, but they're totally lined up.
I just might have something for you here. Look through my papers.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No interrupt. No,
You
no,
were
no,
saying
no.
something. You were saying something.
Hmm.
But it just struck me as like, I need
What
to
could
say
it
this
be?
right now.
Yeah. We're just wrapping up here pretty much, at least for part
Yeah.
one. We'll see how
Well, that's why
how she goes.
I want you to lead the wrap up so that I can just sort of
Yeah.
help tie all the loose ends that I inadvertently created.
Well, we still have a solid 20
me.
minutes, so. So you're back from your break, so I can
Yeah.
talk at you for a bit.
Yeah. I'm going to be like
All right.
occupied physically.
Well, anyways,
but
so yeah,
you're
it
not
came
gonna see
back
that.
to the.
Come here, buddy.
It came back to the um, like the meditation on this whole triad holonic modeling. Like this is what we started the stream with. The holonic modeling, we call them triads. It's actually a triad uh, plus holon. And yeah, this is a a physical description of that holon pattern among these four, right? With the horizon being here, so you've got your holon, right?
It's kind of
Guild,
sucks that I have to watch this in a
model,
20-second delay.
archetype.
YouTube.
You get the idea.
Yeah.
So that's the
Yeah,
basic
that's what I was
triad,
talking
right?
about.
Yeah.
That's what I
So
was talking about.
that
this
we're
is
seeing that, this is
uh,
perfect, conclusion, I think, of this. And it comes back to that meditation. And so I wonder, did we cover the fundamental meditation? Because remember, there was the disconnect. We never actually showed how you go down, how you observe something here as through the mirage of, is it really a fluid thing? Or is this, I'm going to see an object in my perception, in my mechanics, and identify an object, and then start working with that. Right? And then, so this object is of a type, and of course, so it's a chair, right? So you move down a layer.
So that's part of yes. So this would be related to this.
And we skipped
That's
that.
the-
We went straight for this is the whole pie. It looks like this, kind of like last stream, right?
Yeah.
We kind of jumped
It's
it.
because it tackles so many facets of the experience. So that facet was just about the areas of concern and the natural concerns and the link between them and the
Right.
grid that in the hierarchy and just
Yeah.
all of that mess. This
Fire-
meditation talks about neural OS layers themselves. No, sorry. Yeah. Okay, yeah. The one that you're talking about
This is it's supposed to be the
just-
fundamental meditation, right? So like this is the thing, like to introduce you
Oh,
to basically a member
they're
would
all-
know. A member would know
all of
right
these-
away. Okay, that's what this is.
yeah, all of these descriptions are of the fundamental meditation. So it's not
Right.
like we're looking at a
Ye-
discrepancy.
okay.
So we're looking at it from a
And
different,
so I'm-
completely different perspective.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to like
and all
think
that.
in terms of commodification of something, and so in many cases, like oh, it's this, that. Of
So
course.
this would show up as different products. Or, in Buddhism, for example, you have this concept of objects of meditation. So you have like a set of 40 or something objects to meditate on, and they're all supposed to quote unquote, do different things.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them more so than others. Some
40
are more
objects?
complete than others. Oh yeah.
Damn.
But not all of them are viable for like the whole process. For example, you'd have to switch out objects if you were to choose initial ones, specific initial ones. For example, body meditation that has a discursive tendency to like separate body parts into different categories,
Mhm.
like elemental categories, for example. Because you're doing a lot of discursive stuff, but you need to stop doing that to rise to the next what's called yana. You can't use that very same object to continue. You have to literally pick a different option at that
Right.
point. So you have this sort of like marketplace, but you also have meaning behind it.
A marketplace of meditation objects.
Yeah, but it's very conservative. Like it doesn't change over time. You can't commodify any of the objects. Like they're all unique.
Right. It makes sense. Like
and
we are
they're- and-
obviously a being, an organism in an environment, as a being, a body with this neural OS magically creating the world around us for us, etc.
So I haven't been able to like assert that kind of extravagant field of choice for this. Breath has been like obviously go-to substance that covers
Right.
every base.
So just
And
very quickly, I wanted to, if you could, because I know you've described this in the past, explain the process of viewing an object, and then that object as a type of an object. So like moving into the abstract as this physical object which is happening in your brain happens to represent an abstraction. You're not actually looking at the chair, but you've got an object, right? So moving that meditation of moving into the abstract for purposes of
Yeah.
later onto the mimetic. Could you describe that?
Well, first of all, object is a narrative, type is a narrative. So already you're actually creating narratives about narratives. So first and foremost,
Narrative being the
about this-
concrete archetype in the triads. I don't know if you have a chart for that, but anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, medically speaking, it is that. But my point is that if you're looking at our charts, then it is above the horizon. And so even despite the fact that your neural OS is working in terms of, or sorry, with the mechanics of objects, it
Mhm.
works. It works under the hyperstition or the mythology of the narrative that is beyond the horizon, the patterns objects, and that is reflected back in. Um, that is parallel. That narrative, basically, like if you were to go back the other way around, comes through together by a certain, like taking the mimetic mechanics and taking together types, splicing them together with objects to give meaning to whatever attributes that they appear to present themselves with at any given instant in time over many different successive frames, which end up forming that narrative that we're talking about beyond the horizon. So we
Right,
only
so you're
have
just explaining a
access.
concrete triad, basically,
Yeah.
right now.
So we only really have access to one frame at a time to respond to, but we can't. But it's so happening so fast that we're kind of like peering beyond the horizon into a narrative that we assume is there, but can't really touch, smell, see, or fart or
Right.
whatever.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So you're explaining the smooth feeling of a reality that kind of floats and
Mhm.
shimmers on top of everything. But as soon as you try and go meditate about it and see, okay, what actually reality is it? You're seeing these objects come flash up and down like the quantum mechanics thing, where things just
The-
appear and they're gone.
So the first discrepancy is to separate the idea of the objects that build up the narrative from being the narrative, and that's what we see being the actual problem with this window.
Right.
See how
Yeah.
it's moved up, shifted
And that's
up?
a
It makes it-
reification where the
Yeah.
mind comes back down on something and says, "You are
Yeah,
this."
it's this discrepancy is saying that the window is shifting to is trying to represent what is technically objects as narratives because it only has objects about narratives and so on and so forth. Like again,
Right.
the objects that show up ultimately are narrative in nature, which is how you sort of have that shimmering effect of
Mhm.
reality, sort of coming through this horizon, but it is
Right.
still a horizon. It is still
And-
inaccessible in a technical sense.
Of course, in other words,
Um,
it's constrained up through the stack to be like that, to look like that.
Yeah, yeah. And this
Yeah.
narrative provides with all the whys, all the who's, all the whatnot,
Yep.
and it's not even what you are. Like you, the mechanics don't care. Objects are only being put together for the continuity of the process.
Right, and the mechanics is what
Um,
we're trying to look at here by throwing these
Yeah.
kind of things out, right?
And the horizon, what comes through the horizon is the patterning of all of this, which hijacks the course of action it takes, if you will. Um, in terms of foreground and background, which is a subject I don't think we covered very well in any stream,
Hmm.
but we have talked about
And
it
so you're
sometimes
probably
before.
talking about stuff,
so yeah.
stuff like having a worldview and this myth world
In mi-
ideas,
Yeah,
just
all the way back down in
contaminating
mimetics.
everything, so
Yeah,
to speak.
all the way back down in mimetics is a way to pinpoint out the foreground memes that drive the path, if you will, through frame to frame to frame to frame to frame, as opposed to any other meme within the same memeplex as to like why it would be this way versus that way versus the other way. So it's like all the pure potential becoming a
Mm-hmm.
specific
Yeah.
actuality.
And so this is kind of
That's
like
that.
approaching the mimetic when the specifics kind of turns into a goo or just like a
Hmm.
blob,
Hmm.
right?
So, so the entire point of pointing that out is to say that, hey, um, you're always going to be like sort of confined to above the horizon that you can't even reach in terms of what you'll pattern
Right.
your objects by. So you're stuck to those patterns, and it patterned from a place which you cannot control, and it is quote unquote
Right.
above from a
That
perspective of significance and fundamentalism.
and that kind of
So,
situates us here, right?
mhm,
Like in that in that in that what we model and project into our reality is based on this up through this stack, right? Like the neural OS layers.
so hold on,
Right,
hold
I'll
on.
put
Let me just
that up.
finish that.
Right, go ahead.
So hold on. Let me just finish that.
Yeah.
So now, so so there's a discrepancy between object and narrative. Now, there's also a point to be made about why three only going through what three layers down and that's it. In particular, it's because one gives us the uh, category template for the objects within our narratives, and the second one gives us the rule set for how those category objects interact with one another in the space
Mm-hmm.
and time. So those are the reasons why we limit ourselves to an ontology and all of those kinds of things. So if we don't jump through the discrepancy, we are looking at a pretty much a given set of objects by our APS,
Right.
right? We don't question what those objects are,
Rigid.
bec- despite the fact that they are only symbolic representations of something that they're isomorphic to. And therefore, we are no longer questioning whether we should continue on down the layered path. However, this also obfuscates the fact that there's mechanics that built this whole structure up to begin with. If we don't make that
Mm-hmm.
assumption, and if we only look at the object as a narrative, as a playground for objects, that is to say, we shift in one way we're shifting the window down, but in the other way we're shifting all the layers up into the window to the narrative and the abstract and the to the narrative to the object and the type, but we're assigning the types to be memes, we're assigning the objects to be types, and we're
Right.
assigning the narratives to be objects. And so by making that shift, either you can look at it both ways. You can look at it as the window shifting down, or you can look at it as the
Right.
layers shifting
And these
up
are like
into the
also
window.
correspond with two like fundamental like meditative stances, I guess. Like just maybe normal and then like kind of like
Yeah.
inner
So
looking kind of.
what you're doing here is you're short circuiting the narrative, you're short circuiting meaning, you're short circuiting the myth,
Right.
you're short circuiting the
And
entire layer
so
above in which you're playing.
if you've never thought about or if you've never shifted from this normal cognitive mode into the other one in any serious extent, it hasn't affected you to that range that or extent that it could, and it
You wouldn't play with the
right.
memes to the extent that you would, or understand the nature of how they're built up by themselves,
Yeah, it
self-referential, essentially.
manifests in daily activities, in how you relate to the
Because
world, whether you believe that it's alive or not.
Right,
Basically, back to
because the other
animism.
part of it is that because the other part of it is that all the activity is mimetic, all of it. The type, the abstract and the concrete elements to it are sort of like pattern recognizing a machine learning networks made up of made up of obviously organic cells, but they're not contributing to the mechanical element of this operation. They're not contributing to like foregrounding, backgrounding. Like you can erase all memory, and the organism will still move and do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it will
Yep.
still operate based on its senses.
Exactly, and so
Um,
the mind has emerged out of something like even what we think of
yeah,
like
it's
as
another sense of
cognition,
feeding into it, and you could say that that would be missing.
right?
For example.
And there's always been an
Um,
yes, like very intelligent systems. In other words, like the correlation, the isomorphism between the inner model of a structure of matter and the outer reality, right? There's a correspondence,
yeah.
an isomorphism, and if it's there, then it's there, and life lives on. And this is
Well,
what's
that's
been
the
stacking
entire idea
up, right?
behind natural selection. That's the entire idea behind evolution under
Yep.
natural selection. You can only take so many variations on this path before entropy
Right.
takes it out.
And you have to consider that at potentially every layer, right? So as soon as you start moving out of nature, quote unquote,
Yeah.
into civilization, suddenly things become. It's not just taken for granted that everything is subject to what do you call it? Survival of the fittest. Not everything is just dying off if it doesn't work. We introduce
Well,
the
what that
mind
it
into and
disembodies
social.
survival because it makes survival about the survival of the system.
Anyways, we got about 5 minutes left till the hardcore like 4 hour mark.
Perfect,
So
perfect.
you know I don't want to even
No,
go
no,
on
perfect.
another minute for now.
I'm-
I think we've
if-
well rounded. Appreciate.
If I take it any further than 5 minutes, I'm not going to survive till tomorrow.
But wait, what about part two?
uh, Part two, if I would have to sacrifice some sleep or something. But
You
I
don't want
think,
to do that.
I don't think. No, I don't think that's happening.
Yeah,
So
buddy.
let's finish up within the next 5 minutes. If there's anything we want to leave out, leave in. Sorry,
Cool.
I think I'm going to take over a little bit because I want to make sure that.
Yeah, we've already wasted a minute though, and I don't want to go over that because if it's
It's
whatever.
understood that I want to look. So if
So
we're narrowing
your understanding of dreams, myth, and magic, as we have portrayed, summarize us. Hit us with the relevance. Tell us the true
Sure.
story.
Fine.
Hey, you wanted it. Take it
Myth, dreams,
away.
and magic. Okay.
You
so
got 3
myth-
minutes.
Myth is what combines the archetypical elements of narrative that show up through experience. So it's the thing that combines all the
Mhm.
various narratives that are experienced in a shared
Not the
layer.
specifics, but kind of the background why explanation.
Yeah. So this could come in a very obfuscated way via the number system through the market system. That's
Right.
the viral
Mhm.
siphoning of the code that makes it impossible to actually reify properly.
Right.
Or it could be a direct connection with between all the layers and such that the mythology follows the environment.
Right.
follows
So
the
not a
follows
fiat
the-
disconnect, in other words. Hmm.
Still fiat, but not
Right.
disconnected.
Not arbitrarily fiat.
Exactly. Magic is where I think you probably nailed it. I kind of missed the entire spiel there, unfortunately.
Just using
But
models to get things done. One of the
Yeah.
other big points of that was,
It comes back as the
are
fiat.
you sort of the one with the intention and the initiative that's doing this, or is it
So
just
that's
reaction to
like
that, right?
that's like the spellcaster versus the spell sort of recipient. What do you call
Right,
those?
I guess.
Is there a word for that?
Well, that's relating
curse?
to sorcery.
Yeah.
There,
I know,
instead
but
of
what would you
magic,
call
well, there's magic and sorcery. There can be black and white of either.
that? Okay. Let's call magic white. Let's call
But
sorcery.
the
black.
idea of sorcery being that you're manipulating the will of others, just to give a simple, straightforward thing.
Yeah, arbitrary, dysmorphic,
Hmm.
right? We're still on the isomorphic dysmorphic divide. So
And
if
that's
we do that, then yeah, we can do it
Relating
that
to
way.
the white and black aspects. Yep. Okay.
Okay, so the idea here is regarding the fiat transfer, the fiat resonance of between stacks and whether or not the intended coding is resonating properly within the other stack that is
That's important. Yeah.
being affected. So the.
By the way, we
that's-
got
that is-
we got 20 seconds left, I'll say, until we're
So-
at,
so-
gonna cut it.
So music is don't do it by seconds. Music is is magic. You know, like art is magic, but psychotherapy is magic. Advertising is magic. Those are the sorcery versus magic, I guess. Points could be made there specifically.
Hmm.
And but dreams cannot be done in the 10 seconds. So, dreams,
Yeah,
you take
buddy.
over that.
No, I'm gonna cut it off right here because we're at the near 4 hour mark, and one of my programs doesn't like it too much. So we're gonna do either part
Oh, okay,
two or
okay,
just carry on from here out. But that was pretty awesome,
okay.
well rounded and fantastic. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining me, and thanks for our
I saluted you, but
faithful
you didn't see it.
viewers. No, I didn't. All right, buddy. Cutting her out.
Cheers.